January the 29th, 2026. Welcome back to the Two Witnesses Live. I'm your host, Watchful, and here we are for another day of covering... I don't know. I need to come up with a better intro. When we would go straight into the Daily Torment Report, it was easy because I could just explain what the Daily Torment Report is. But now that we have the different segments, I got to work on my intro. We need the Fury Minute. Ooh, Fury, I got to do an intro for you. The Fury Minute, where Fury gives us her update of the day. And then we've got the Daily Torment Report, where we cover the posts from the men who are tormenting the world the most. And then we have Addressing the House of Israel, where we react to either a Jewish or a Christian video in order to get their attention, to bring them to mind, to bring them to the channel, for whatever purpose. For Israel, it's so that they'll realize that Jesus is the Messiah, and for the Christians, it's to realize where we are in the timeline, because ain't nobody getting it right. I don't know if we're getting it right, but I think our data is way better. To bring them to the data. And then there's the timeline report. So the timeline report, which is the data. So I don't know. I need to work on my intro. But anyway, my name is Watchful. And I pride myself on watching God and paying attention to what's going on around us, because the signs are everywhere. I think most people realize that. All right, let's get into our Fury Minutes. Fury says, so when I think I could possibly be wrong, is that possible? So does that mean when you think you could possibly be wrong, or never possibly be wrong? Anyway, she says, so when I think I could possibly be wrong about something, I have to do research on it. I admit I was wrong about the word Moslem, M-O-S-L-E-M, is an archaic term for Muslim. However, some do take offense to it. I was not wrong, however, about some mistaking Mormons for Muslims and calling them that. I did a deep dive into it and found that indeed, even today, some make that mistake and think that Mormons and Islam are the same religion. This is the first time, I have to admit, this is the first time I've ever actually heard that. Granted, I don't know as much about Islam as I do about Mormons. I have a lot of Mormon friends. There are definitely things about the Mormons that I admire, and also things that I don't admire. But first, I've heard of this. So Muslims, some people think they're the same religion. And yes, when I was growing up, many people who didn't understand them mistook them for Islam. I lost my place. There it is. So Joseph Smith was even called the new Muhammad, and there were many references to them in Islamic, including their belief in polygamy. But no, they are not the same religion, and although many Christians refuse to see them as such, LDS considers themselves to be Christians. That's my experience as well. As for whether any particular religion is a cult, I refuse to get into that and will leave that to your discernment. I have my own opinion on a lot of religions. There was a lot more on my deep dive that I found out. Later, if it comes up in the discussion, it might prove useful. I did read what you sent me, Fury. By the way, for disclosure, I am a member of the LDS Family Search Org and have been for many years since I researched genealogy, and therefore I do a lot of research into LDS and their apps and databases. Also, my dad had a lot of influences on us, not just because he was my dad, but because he was the preacher. And even though back then he didn't even have a phone, you couldn't hide anything you did. For him, if you as a teen in his church got into a fight in a neighboring town on Saturday night, you would hear it from the pulpit the next morning in church and be wondering how on earth he found out. So if he had said not to bully those newcomers in town and not to call them names, you didn't dare do it, because he would find out and you would hear about it next Sunday morning. We are looking mostly at Iran, and Trump is still mulling his next step there. More arrests have been going on in Minnesota, and they are really going after Ilhan Omar so many others. Yeah, I grew up with a lot of Mormons, a lot of Jewish. I grew up with people from all kinds of religions. The church that I grew up in, their business model, so to speak, their church model was in-home Bible fellowships. So it wasn't like I would actually go to a building in order to learn about God. It was usually we'd go to somebody's home and learn about God. Good structure based on the first century church and how Jesus structured that you would go to people's homes. However, there's also a severe lack of control, and things out of hand, and that's how the cult-like behavior came in for whatever reason. Um, and whether a particular religion is a cult or not, I think everybody, even I think every one of these groups has the potential to become a cult. There are specific definitions for cults, in that typically there is a central leader and a doctrine of control. My experience is that they tend to be narcissists, and they have ultimate authority. And there's tends with cults, there tends to be, I guess there's, imagine if you really dig into the details, there's probably a list of attributes that you could identify, but there's generally a fear, or there's generally a respect and a particular belief. Everybody thinks they're right, which that's just kind of human nature, but especially in cults, to where it's us versus them is very common. Um, and in some cases, there's a love for the leader that can extend to multiple levels. Thankfully, well, yeah, I like Fury. I won't go into too much details, but what I really wanted to say, respond to that in regards to churches and whether they're cults or not. Jesus actually gave us direction on this in the end times, and in Revelation 1 through 3. He basically, anybody, we're given this image of the Son of Man, and it's a pretty magnificent image. Brass feet of brass and cool clothes, an awesome beard, eyes like fire. But he's surrounded by 7 candlesticks. Those candlesticks we later learn from, the angel give, defining the elements of that image is that the candlesticks represent the churches. So you have this visual imagery of churches that surround the Son of Man, that surround the Son of God. And I I think we're led to believe that these are the groups that follow the Lamb. So you've got that imagery that this is the Lamb of God, this is the Son of God, this is the Messiah, and he breaks down everybody who follows him into 7 categories. And I would say that pretty much any group that teaches about Yeshua, whether they get it right or wrong, but that follow him in some way, shape, or form, probably fit into one of those categories. The reason I say that is because out of the 7 categories, 5 of them are not perfect. Not by any stretch of the imagination. 5 of them have things they need to fix, and I think that's true about a lot of churches. Is whether they're run by narcissists, whether they're occults, regardless of what it is that they teach, their doctrine. They've got something. If they're in the 5 groups with something to fix, they need to be looking at those and fixing them. Issues such as doctrinal issues, following the doctrine of Balaam, suffering the woman Jezebel, sexual issues, child sacrifice. I mean, it's some pretty severe stuff that are included in the churches that follow the Son of Man, that follow the Messiah. But out of the 7 categories, there are 2 who have nothing to repent from. You've got Smyrna, the church under thalipsis pressure, which is crushing pressure. And then you have Philadelphia, the church of brotherly love, the church that has, while it has little strength, loves his name and loves their neighbor as themselves. So you get this kind of sense that, the two churches that really don't have anything to change before he returns. You have to remember when he returns, there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that's going to be corrected. We're going to go before him. I don't know what the stages are. I love to think about the logistics of these things. You guys know I do, to where, like, what's it going to be like when he returns? I imagine when he returns the first time, that first harvest, there's going to be logistics. Maybe not a lot of time for questions, probably preparations, hello, highs, get set up here, this group over here. If your name is, A through D, you're going over here. Probably some logistical coordination, but there will come a time where answers are given. So, doctrinal issues will go away. Who you are and what you've done, that's going to be a big issue. Your works follow you. No, you're not saved by works, but it's clear that your works follow you. So those in those different categories who are who are caught up and who are part of the harvest and stuff like that, it's not going to be, one great big celebration at some point. I mean, yeah, I imagine there's going to be a lot of celebrations. It's going to be a joyous occasion, but there's also going to be giving an answer for things, right? And I think of the scariest verse in the Bible, where many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, did we not perform miracles in your name? Did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not do many wonderful works in your name? And he'll say, I never knew you. So, yeah, whether the church, where they fit into those categories, I myself have tried to categorize different churches to see where, in my opinion, different denominations fit in those groups as a means to try and help them. And should he tarry, we'll probably go down that path to where we'll invest more time into that to see if we can't help them. That goes for me too. If there's things I need to fix before he returns, we should be looking inward. But if there's anything I can do to help others, to look, what are you doing wrong? This is what you need to fix before he returns. But yeah. So, but yeah, Mormons. I've growing up, I had more experience with Mormons. Love the Mormons. They've got really great family values. Definitely don't agree with everything they believe. I've sung in their tabernacle. I've been to their meetings and their groups, and have gotten into deep end time conversations with Mormons. And some of my best friends were Mormon too. Were our LDS. They changed from Mormon to LDS. But never really experienced any kind of confusion between Islam and Mormons. That's a new one for me. But apparently it's a thing. All right. Anything else? Let's see. You can really look at any religion and find reasons to say they are a cult. Agreed. When you look at sacrifice in modern times, you might look at certain surgeries and pregnancy. Yeah. Pregnancies, let's see, faith without works is dead according to the Bible. Your works don't save you, but they are evidence of who you are. Well said. All right, let us move on to our daily torment report. Starting off with Donald Trump, we're just going to read from the top down to the bottom because not a whole lot of posts today. Let's see what he has to say. So this is his new pinned comment. I think this is just the one about the armada. See, a massive armada is heading to Iran. It is moving quickly with great power, enthusiasm, and purpose. It is a larger fleet headed by the great aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln than that sent to Venezuela. Like with Venezuela, it is ready, willing, and able to rapidly fulfill its mission with speed and violence if necessary. Sorry, I've been drinking soda. I always get irpy when I drink soda. Hopefully, Iran will quickly come to the table and negotiate a fair and equitable deal. No nuclear weapons. One that is good for all parties. Time is running out. It is truly of the essence As I told Iran once before, make a deal. They didn't, and there was Operation Midnight Hammer, major destruction of Iran. The next attack will be far worse. Don't make that happen. Don't make that happen again. Thank you for your attention to this matter. President Donald J. Trump. Yeah, I imagine time is of the essence because he's actually running up against the closure of the government again. I was listening today about what the Democrats are demanding in order to continue funding the continuation of the government, which includes the military, and they are taking a hard line and doing some ridiculous stuff. I should have made a list, but obviously they want. So ICE is funded because ICE received a lot of funding with the big beautiful bill. Suffice it to say, ICE and border security and homeland security are funded until basically Apophis hits the earth in 2029. So they want to pull back some of that funding. They want to start putting limitations on ICE, obviously, and some other ridiculous stuff, which Trump is not going to go for. So I imagine that he's up against the wall on the government shutdown, which will be interesting because that could affect how things play out and when things play out. So definitely have our eye on that. Moving on. Posted an hour ago. Based on the fact that Canada has wrongfully, illegally, and steadfastly refused to certify the Gulfstream 500, 600, 700, and 800 jets, one of the greatest, most technologically advanced airplanes ever made, we are hereby decertifying their Bombardier Global Expresses and all aircraft made in Canada until such a time as Gulfstream, a great American country, is fully certified, as it should have been many years ago. Further, Canada is effectively prohibiting the sale of Gulfstream products in Canada through this very same certification process. If for any reason this situation is not immediately corrected, I'm going to charge Canada a 50% tariff on any and all aircraft sold into the United States of America. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America. Wow. Good Lord. Good for him. Oh, Fury says Trump struck a deal with the Dems tonight that is going to keep the government from shutting down. Fantastic. Well, that's good news. I was worried that we were going to go into another freaking month-long shutdown. That's amazing. I wonder what the deal is. Kind of makes you wonder if he didn't prepare ahead of time for this. All right, also an hour ago, America is setting records in every way, and our growth numbers are among the best ever. The only thing that can slow our country down is another long and damaging government shutdown. I am working hard with Congress to ensure that we are able to fully fund the government without delay. Republicans and Democrats in Congress have come together to get vast majority of government funded until September. Interesting that you would pick that date, that month, while at the same time providing an extension to the Department of Homeland Security, including the very important Coast Guard, which we are expanding and rebuilding like never before. Hopefully, both Republicans and Democrats will give a very much needed bipartisan yes vote. President Donald J. Trump. So it's interesting that he would have that we would be funded. Oh, I forgot to start the clock. How long have we been going? 20 minutes? We'll do another 15 on Trump. It's interesting that he would get that funded until September from a timeline perspective, because you have the potential opening of seal number 6 on August 12th. But September is when the Festival of Trumpets is, which is generally associated with rapture timelines, like rapture watch windows. Like every September, everybody freaks out that this is the year of the rapture. So, if we do have the opening of seal number 5 and potentially the opening of seal number 6, it's interesting that we would be funded until September. these dates stick in my mind when seeing this kind of stuff. I did do some more research on, remember how I said I was going to work on a simulation to figure out if there was an eclipse? Because seal number 6 says the sun will be darkened and the moon will no longer give its light. It'll be turned to blood. I had speculated that I wonder if there's a solar eclipse, if it were possible that there were a solar eclipse and the earth would then rotate, that it would be then seen as a blood moon. And I did do some simulations with that, just using different AI models, and they all kind of generally agree that it's not possible just because of the position of the planet. Like the entire planet would have to move into its other position that's 2 weeks away. So one thing that is interesting about the opening of the seals is that they represent periods of time. And I think we've all fallen prey to this, to where we assume that when the seal opens, the fullness of what the seal represents is going to happen on that day. And from what we've seen, that has not been the case. For instance, December 26, 2019, the opening of seal number 1, it's not like the pandemic had been global at that point in time. And actuality, what happened is that was when the first like news broadcasts of some kind of unusual cold had started to happen. And it wasn't only in hindsight until they tracked back the initial, flame, the spark, the starting point of the pandemic to December. And then, but it went for several years, right? And then the same thing with December 14th, 2020. It's not like peace was not taken away from the earth on that day, but that's when, somebody was given the power, the potential, the capability to take peace away, and then also the tool and the mechanism by which to do that, which was used on the entire world. And, over the course of his administration, he, took peace away from the earth and, used that tool, the vaccine, as a weapon on the entire planet. So, we have to keep that in mind with these seals too, is, the opening of seal number 5 is, it may represent the start of the Great Tribulation, but it could just be the event that sparks, that lights the flame, that starts the flame that lasts for a period of time. So I said all of that to point at seal number 6, to where there could be a 2-week period of time. Like that could be when the earth starts to kind of wobble. Maybe it doesn't actually flip on that day, although there is an eclipse on that day. But it could be a 2-week period of time, which might lead us to the actual Festival of Trumpets, to where if that is a watch window, to where Christ would, return after 2 weeks. Just want to preface that because I know there's going to be people saying, you're a date setter, you've been proved wrong again, as soon as those date hits, and, something may be delayed. That's how it works. That's how we've observed that it seems to work so far. Anyway, let's get back over here to our boy Donald. All right, so did I read this already? America is setting records in every way. Yeah, America is setting records in every way, and our growth numbers are among the best ever. The only thing that can slow our country down now is another long and damaging government shutdown. Yeah, we did read this. Fury says the agreement includes advancing 5 spending bills and funding the Department of Homeland Security for 2 weeks as lawmakers negotiate changes to DHS and ICE. Think September, not December 25th. 2 weeks brings us to February 17th. Of course it does. Of course it does. It's amazing. Thank you, Fury. All right, moving on. Let's see this post from 8 hours ago. The story of Alex Peretti, read by Elizabeth Warren. Oh, no. Oh, no. This is going to get me in trouble.
Caring for people was at the core of who he was. He was incapable of causing harm. Alex carried patience, compassion, and calm as a steady light within him. Even at the very end, that light was there. I recognized his familiar stillness and signature calm composure.
That's hilarious. That is absolutely hilarious. You know, it's when has anybody ever in the course of history had both the knowledge of future events while watching what was written about the future come to pass, and to see how the people who received the revelation communicated it? My point being is this information was given to Jesus, who taught his disciples, and in regards to John, who wrote the book of Revelation, most likely, he sent an angel and signified it to him, gave him a bunch of these visions and imagery that we're literally watching come to pass right now. So when it talks about the two witnesses, for anyone who would tend to harm them, fire would come from their mouth, and that they would prophesy for 1,260 days. But to see that actually in action and see what the fulfillment of that meant, has there ever been a time in history where something like this was possible? I mean, like, we're literally watching the fire from the mouth of an anointed one who's standing before the Lord of the whole earth. And it's hilarious. Who knew God had such a sense of humor? You know what I mean? I'm sorry. I enjoy this entirely too much. All right. 8 hours ago, I had a very productive telephone conversation with President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico. It went extremely well for both countries. Much of it was focused on the border, stopping drug trafficking and trade. We will be speaking again soon and ultimately setting up meetings in our respective countries. Mexico has a wonderful and highly intelligent leader. They should be happy about that. President Donald J. Trump. Jerome Too Late Powell, let's see what this is, 12 hours ago. Jerome Too Late Powell again refused to cut interest rates, even though he has absolutely no reason to keep them so high. He is hurting our country and its national security. We should have a substantially lower rate now. That even this moron admits inflation is no longer a problem or a threat. Speaking of fire from the mouth, he is costing America hundreds of billions of dollars a year, billions of dollars a year, in totally unnecessary and uncalled for interest expense. Because of the vast amounts of money flowing into our country because of tariffs, we should be paying the lowest interest rate of any country in the world. Most of these countries are low interest rate paying cash machines, thought of as elegant, solid, and prime only because USA is allowing them to be. The tariffs being charged to them while bringing in billions to us still allows most of them to have a significant trade surplus. Though much smaller with our beautiful, formerly abused country. In other words, I have been very nice, kind, and gentle to countries all over the world. With a mere flip of the pen, billions more would come into the USA, and these countries would have to go back to making money the old-fashioned way, not on the back of America. I hope they all appreciate, although many don't, what our great country has done for them. The Fed should substantially lower interest rates now. Tariffs have made America strong and powerful again, far stronger and more powerful than any other nation, commensurate with this strength, both financial and otherwise. We should be paying lower interest rates than any other country in the world. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Let's see, 13 hours ago from Donald Trump, President Trump's legal team exposing the 2020 election fraud at the Georgia State Farm Arena, pulling suitcases full of alleged fraudulent ballots from under tables. Boy, do I remember that. After the election center was shut down, running the same stacks of ballots over and over and over all throughout the night. All throughout the night until Biden was ahead, stealing the election from President Trump. This is exactly why the FBI raided the election center today in Fulton County, Atlanta, Georgia. This is only the beginning. Prosecutions are coming. Well, that would be great. Trump won big. Crooked election. All right, 14 hours ago from Real Robert. This is November 3rd, 2020 election. Here is the Georgia Secretary of State Raffensperger in the early morning hours of November 4th, 2020, confirming Trump won the state of Georgia just hours before the United States government was overthrown. We have about 2% left to go. As you can see where we are right now, it will not change the outcome. In fact, he doubles down after being reprimanded. Oh, that was an interesting. We were just getting to the good part. Raffensperger, we don't guess. What we do is report. In other words, if 100% of the remaining 2% of votes went to the vegetable in the basement, Donald Trump still won the state of Georgia. Okay. Is that the actual post that was from November 3rd? I mean, yeah, I believe all that. I remember watching video after video and, report after report and proof after proof and just saw nothing ever come of it. But, these things have to come to pass. I mean, like seal number 2, it had to come to pass. I mean, obviously you won the election, but we needed that for whatever reason. Well, I mean, I think we know the reason, because we're in this end time, and there are things that must come to pass in order to, get to that harvest, right? This is the preparation for the harvest. Obviously, the separation of the wheat and the tares, or whatever you want to call it. Sorrows, the time of sorrows, I think is the official term. Let's see. Breaking. DNI Tulsi Gabbard was just spotted on the Fulton County, Georgia election site raided by the FBI involving likely 2020 election fraud. I wonder if he's using some of this stuff as leverage to keep the government open. Probably. As they gather this proof, if they're not using it as leverage. It's like he's just constantly acquiring leverage and then putting it to work to accomplish what it is he needs to get done. Because I don't know what's going to come of this. I mean, what does he want? Does he want a third term? Does he want to invalidate what Biden did? I don't know. I don't know what the end goal of this is. Just to prove that he was right. It would be great if the end goal was just to prosecute the cheaters and the liars and, show to the American people what actually happened. I'd be good with that result. Let's see. Tulsi Gabbard was just spotted at the Fulton County, Georgia election site raided by the FBI involving likely 2020 election fraud. As ballots were seized and computers were examined, wow, this is getting serious. Tulsi plays no games. Liberals are terrified at this site. Expose the fraud. Show the people Trump was what? Right. Photo per AP. How was this? Is this the... There you go.
FBI agents are going through materials found today during a search of the Fulton County, Georgia election office. That search is said to be related to the 2020 election. Correspondent David Spunt has details tonight. Good evening, David.
Brett, good evening. FBI agents are still on site at the records warehouse for the Fulton County, Georgia Board of Elections. The matter is sealed before a court, meaning details are limited, but we can report this is related to the 2020 presidential election. Sources tell Fox News that agents retrieved documents, phones, and computers after a judge signed a warrant. President Trump has long made Georgia, and specifically Fulton County, a target of his complaints relating to the 2020 election. Shortly after that election, Trump spoke to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and said
That's
he
our
needed
time.
11,780 votes to
Time
win the
alarm.
state. At the time, Raffensperger said he felt pressure from Trump and denied any widespread election fraud. He continues to deny it to this day. Now, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis brought state criminal charges against then former President Trump and others in 2023 for conspiracy to overturn the election. But her prosecution, Brett, was eventually derailed completely after it was revealed she had an intimate relationship with the top prosecutor on her team.
Yeah. So Fury makes a really good point that we have to root out this corruption, otherwise it will happen again. That's ultimately the end. The end goal is get elections honest again and make it so that the American people can actually trust the elections. So yeah, that's fair. All right. See, do we have anything else that we want to cover? Not only is Barack Hussein falsely, okay. Spy game exposed. Yeah, let's see how this starts off.
Brand new details about how Obama's CIA targeted Trump and started the entire Russia hoax. For years, we were told that tips from an Australian diplomat tipped off the FBI after a random conversation with Papadopoulos, a no-name 20-something. But according to new reporting by Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi, the whole thing was a CIA setup. Former CIA director John Brennan identified 26 Trump associates to be targeted by the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, and then those interactions were the targets and were targeted by the FBI as suspicious. And that's how the FBI launched the Russia collusion hoax. The details of this entire operation have been stored in a top-secret binder in a secret room in Washington. Trump ordered the whole thing declassified, and now the rumor is that the binder might be missing. Joining me now, one of the reporters who broke the story, Michael Schellenberger. Michael, explain how this all started with the CIA picking these 26 Trump people.
Yeah, good to be with you, Jesse. Well, obviously, this is an extremely serious story and serious allegation by multiple credible sources that Public and Racket, that's Matt Taibbi's publication, have spoken to. These are people that are close to the House intelligence investigation of how the Russia collusion hoax began. The story, as you mentioned, was that, oh, we were just informed by foreign intelligence about this. Our sources tell us a very different story, which is that this was initiated by the U.S. government. It came from within the U.S. government's intelligence community, including...
So this is important. Fury just said the color revolution taking place in our country today is the same timeline and playbook used by the three-letter agencies of our country all over the world in other countries, and also is part of Matthew 24 with the nation against nation, house against house. All these things must come to pass. Yeah, and this is the how they do it. Their playbook, definitely. Breaking Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has just released hundreds of bombshell Russiagate documents proving that Barack Obama personally ordered CIA agents to manufacture false intelligence on President Trump and was actively working with the enemy to undermine and erode Americans' confidence in our democracy and President Trump's landslide 2016 victory. This was a coup attempted by Barack Hussein Obama and his cronies. As Jesse Waters said, whatever happens to these guys is not revenge, it's accountability. And it's time for people to pay the price. Arrest Obama now. Boy, wouldn't that be interesting. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on his timeline because normally he doesn't post this much. Just kind of trying to get the lay of the land here.
News alert, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, releasing a bombshell report today that shows a conspiracy.
Yeah, we already read that post. He's just saying the same thing. Watch CNN come realize Trump won Georgia. Yeah. What's next? Marco Rubio is 100% right. About what?
This is one of the many reasons that the left freaks out every time Marco Rubio speaks.
One of the things I see a lot in South Florida are people that have been in this country that maybe came from Cuba 45 years ago. They've worked here their entire lives. They retire. They get $800, $1,000 a month from Social Security. And then they run into somebody who just got here from Cuba 3 months ago, 29 years old, doesn't work, and is given $1,500 a month in benefits by our government because they're refugees. A year later, is traveling back to Cuba 15 times. So you're a refugee fleeing oppression from a place that you now go back and visit 15 times the following year. And in the meantime, we're giving you Medicaid, food stamps, health care for your children, cash payments from the refugee fund. So imagine if you've been working here for 40 years and your Social Security check is smaller than the benefits going to a 28-year-old able-bodied person who just got here. That's real. That happens. That's happening every day. That makes no sense.
So many things happening. It's hard to keep track of this stuff. More election stuff. What else? Let's see. Bill O'Reilly just exposed what he says is most important detail of the Minnesota saga and proves that the media is refusing to report it. Listening closely. Is there a video associated with this? Let's watch this.
Here's the most important part of this whole thing. Unreported. Okay? There is a man in Shanghai, China, an American citizen. His name is Neville Roy Singham. He works with the Beijing government. He is funneling millions of dollars into the United States of America through 501s like Party for Socialism and Liberation, Democratic Socialists of America, Minnesota Immigration Rights Action Committee. There he is, okay? Connecticut-born, 71 years old, billionaire tech guy. He is funneling money here to these radical organizations who are then agitating professional people, communists mostly, because Singham's a communist, all right, to go in and foster rebellion. You heard that story reported? That is absolutely true. The man has been investigated by the FBI in the past, this Singham character, okay? This isn't some organic thing. This is a foreign power, Beijing, using this American citizen who lives openly in Shanghai in luxury, knowing that this man is funneling tens of millions, probably more, into this country to try to destroy the government. What the deuce is that? Where are you, New York Times? All right? That's the second part of the story. There's a local federal story, and there's the international story. And I've had it. You don't like what I'm saying? Blank you, because I'm telling you the truth.
Wow. America could break China dependency with Greenland. Too long. Let's see. Man, I kind of want to watch it. Democrats think Trump is randomly doing stuff. He's like 17 steps ahead of NATO. And by the time they figure it out, it's too late to do anything about it. That is true.
What if I told you there is a new global alignment? And I want you to hear me out, okay? Just hear me out first. Let's do the Greenland component. Greenland has been asking Denmark for help securing itself against Russia and China for over 20 years. They haven't done anything, nor has anyone from any side of the EU or on the NATO side. So case in point, Germany only sent like 14, I think it was literally 14 people when Trump threatened to invade. So you see the commitment from the EU. America, though, has had a treaty post-World War II to put bases basically anywhere they want. But we're not going to overly invest if it's not U.S. soil. But what if we were to acquire it? This would increase American soil by over 20% and enter what we would then call NORCOM, or Northern Command, where our radar could actually detect an ICBM from Russia or China 20 minutes earlier than it does now, because the path would be over the North Pole. This has also serious global impacts to our foes. We'll do China first. China owns 80 to 85% of the global EV battery industry and produces items for our EVs here in America at a ratio of 6 to 1 that we do internally. If America had access to Greenland, we could break that dependency within a year. We also would be able to produce most of our own chips, too, just from the rare earth minerals that are in Greenland. This would de-incentivize China from taking Taiwan, because that's really the only reason they want it, for the semiconductor market, which would hinder America if China controlled that. All right, stay with me here. Also, our acquisition that could break China's Northern Silk Road and secure a northern shipping channel, cutting off trade routes for China and Russia, but also giving us more secure options that could be taxed for other nations, i.e. making our shipping expenses go down dramatically. This would essentially turn Greenland into America's 12th carrier battle group as well. You can't sink it either. And in its current proposal, as the annex proposal stands, Trump offered every person in Greenland $100,000. That would cost us, there are only 57,000 people. It cost us $5.7 billion. Now, compare that to the over $8 billion price tag for a new aircraft carrier. Don't even get me started on the rest of the fleet. See, Trump's not shooting from the hip here. This would allow America to launch a fighter jet from American soil that could touch Beijing and Moscow, which Moscow, along with China, has been looking into take Greenland for a while now for the same reasons, because there's 50 billion barrels of oil just in offshore shallow water wells in and around Greenland, which if America took control of, we could theoretically change the impact of OPEC globally.
Wow.
Now, if we didn't need China for anything and Russia needed to come to the U.S. for oil because we were outproducing OPEC, or needed to beg us for access to the northern shipping routes, suddenly would we all become friends? They need us. Is Trump rebalancing global power with his Greenland move?
Wow.
Look, NATO was originally based on the opposition to fascism and communism. Now the UK puts people in jail for Facebook posts. They have socialist governments and have imported enough people to make them anti-American. We don't share the EU's values anymore.
True that.
What if I told you that America and Russia had more in common than America and the EU?
Oh, I believe that.
Before you freak out and say that I'm pro-Putin, listen to me, okay? Shut up. Putin is the worst, okay? I'm talking about the Russian people. Same demographic, generally same religious base, and given the opportunity, would probably side with American influence over Putin's de facto dictatorship. Remember, they were our ally against Nazi Germany not too long ago. But if Putin knew he couldn't survive our influence, I'd be willing to bet he would buckle. You rope in Brazil after they just saw us kidnap their neighbor's leader. Saudi Arabia would come to heel if we didn't need their oil from OPEC. China would be forced to go along with it after losing their northern mobility and shipping routes, and we wouldn't need their batteries. They'd be ostracized on a global trade route because, remember, Trump has exerted our power on the Panama Canal, so they basically can't get into any other ocean. And Europe, they gave up all their power plants in the Green New Deal aspirations. They imported foreigners, bankrupted themselves with social programs, and have been crushing their farms to the point that they can't even grow their own food anymore. So why do we need them anyway? They contribute basically nothing. 14 troops to it? Thanks, Germany. America's essentially 70% of NATO anyway. Democrats think Trump is just like randomly doing stuff because he's crazy. No, he's actually like 17 steps ahead. And by the time the rest of the world realize it, they're too far behind to do anything about it.
I guess that's what happens when you get up at 5 in the morning and go to bed at midnight. The rest of the country's still sleeping in while he's making moves. That was a really good report. That was well worth our time. That was amazing. Really good points. I agree with you, Fury. It'd be awesome if Russia and the U.S. could ally again. Although, with what's going on in Iran, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. See, Canada is against the Golden Dome being built over Greenland, even though the Golden Dome would protect Canadians, proving corrupt governments do not care about the safety of their country's people. Well, yeah, to be fair, Canada is offing their own people and making it easier for them to off themselves. They are only concerned about China's interests. Good gravy. Oh, man, I really want to watch these. He posted so much today. Man, I guess we're just going to have to go out and just finish this out. Trump gets an hour today.
Breaking news. Donald Trump has just come out and said Canada is against the Golden Dome being built over Greenland, even though...
All right, we already read that post. What is this?
We have just sent a letter to Governor Walz alerting him to something he probably fears and should have taken action in a timely manner to avoid. We are auditing all of the Medicaid bills, in particular for the 14 programs that he and his own administration have admitted were problems, and we're going to claw that money back from the Medicaid monies that they'll be getting.
Good.
Now, this is a major problem for the state because they've got to own the fact that they have been bilking the federal taxpayer for their sloppy behavior for years. What we have learned so far in Minnesota is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, I think we know everything we need to know about that. Let's see. We are looking at the funders. Trump drops the hammer on left-wing terrorism.
This is a presidential memorandum on countering domestic terrorism and organized political violence. In recent weeks, months, and years, we've seen a tremendous upsurge in some highly visible, but also other acts of domestic terrorism and organized political violence being perpetrated by radical, politically motivated groups all over the country. What this presidential memorandum will do is set off an administration-wide response to that, ranging from the Joint Terrorism Task Forces to other components of the Department of Justice, to the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Treasury. We're looking at interdicting these groups, preventing them from performing acts of violence, and also looking at sources of organization and funding and support that prop them up and allow them to do the acts that they have been doing.
We're looking at the funders of a lot of these groups, and you know, when you see the signs, and they're all beautiful signs made professionally, these aren't your protesters that make the sign in their basement late in the evening because they really believe it. These are anarchists and agitators, professional anarchists and agitators, and they get hired by wealthy people, some of whom I know, I guess, you know, I probably know them. And you wouldn't know it. You're at dinner with them, everything's nice, and then you find out that they funded millions of dollars to these lunatics. Steve, could you say a couple of words?
Yes, Mr. President. This is a very historic and significant day. This is the first time in American history that there is an all-of-government effort to dismantle left-wing terrorism, to dismantle Antifa, to dismantle the organizations that have been carrying out these acts of political violence and terrorism. What we have seen, if you look at whether it be going back to the riots that started with Black Lives Matter and all the way through to the Antifa riots, the attacks on ICE officers, the doxing campaigns, and now the political assassinations, these are not lone, isolated events. This is part of an organized campaign of radical left terrorism. It is structured, it is sophisticated, it is well-funded, it is well-planned. There is really no parallel like this to anything else in the country right now. There is an entire system of feeder organizations that provide money, resources, weapons, and when they're attacking ICE officers, they're attacking federal buildings, or they're isolating public officials for harassment, doxing, intimidation, and ultimately attempted assassination. It is all carefully planned, executed, and thought through. It is terrorism on our soil. Because of this executive order, Cash and Pam are going to have the tools they need, working with Scott, to take these organizations apart piece by piece. And the central hub of that effort is going to be the Joint Terrorism Task Force, or JTTF, which sits inside the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But for those at home who are worried about terrorism in this country, they need to understand, because of President Trump's strength, because of his...
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for the executive order, but highly skeptical on if Pam and Cash are actually going to do anything, because I'm still waiting to see the trials in the courts, the cases against so many other people. I mean, everything seems to be going in the right direction, but you'd think they'd have enough to do something now. Start throwing these people in jail. Stick them in jail now while they wait. We deserve answers about... Yeah, we do. What is this?
So just got word that the FBI is in Atlanta, Georgia, conducting a search warrant at the Fulton County election office. And I've spoken to a number of individuals over the last couple of weeks, have not spoken about this publicly, but who have been called in by the FBI for questioning, and was aware that the FBI was here.
I stand corrected. The FBI is actually doing things. Still want to see them in court or in jail.
Here, do not have any information what the search warrant is related to, other than Fox News is reporting it is related to the 2020 election. And I'd like to remind you that the reason that some of us, specifically Burt Jones, Brandon Beach, William Ligon, and myself, the first four that stood up and called for a special session, was so the legislature could do this back in 2020. I'm glad that we finally will be getting to the bottom of whatever it was that happened in 2020, thanks to the federal government. Wish that we could have done it much, much earlier.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling Christ is going to come back before anything actually happens to these people. It's going to be Jesus who's going to be bringing down the hammer. What's this?
And they call it the MAGA revolution. It's not a revolution. It is a counter-revolution. There's a big difference. This is a restoration. Let's use the word Trump restoration. We don't really appreciate what we've been through with 8 years of the Obama revolution and the 4-year more radical third term of Obama, using or employing the waxen effigy of Joe Biden. A revolution that we've experienced was a cultural, economic, political, social revolution. It was very similar to the French Revolution under the Robespierre brothers. We should remember what they...
I think we can assume where he's going with this, and I agree. This is a counter-revolution. I mean, he probably makes a good point. We're short on time. We're going to keep moving, though. See more bad news for Gavin Newsom.
Right now, at this very moment, Walmart is preparing to shut down more than 250 stores across California.
Good.
Not because of consumer demand, not because of competition, but because the math no longer works. And while Governor Gavin Newsom...
Lots of that happening in California. Good. They just need to remove him. Why can't they impeach Newsom? Just get him out of there. See, new in 2026, Trump accounts are jumpstarting the American dream for every child. Oh yeah, he announced yesterday the trumpaccounts.gov, where you can start a savings account for your children.
Let's break down Trump accounts, the new child savings program rolling out in 2026. These are tax.
All right, let's not spend any time on this because I don't even know if it's relevant to. If stuff pops off in February, savings accounts are going to be the least of our concerns. Democrats want to abolish ICE. What Democrats don't want you to see is the faces of all the innocent people killed by illegal aliens. How true is that?
You guys want to abolish ICE? This is what you're asking for. You're asking for more women to die. Your hatred for Donald Trump overshadows the fact that women are getting killed in the streets.
If Joe Biden didn't open up our border and allow 10 million unvetted illegal immigrants into this country, then guess what? Donald Trump would not have had to deploy ICE agents in this fashion.
Can't have open borders. You can't have criminals going in and out of our borders, affecting our women and Holy Spirit.
That's what you want, right? You want a big, tall, black man.
They're flipping us off. They're trying to prevent our voices. They're trying to prevent us from saying their name. Yet it's all about the people they care about. But what about these people? These people matter too.
We are going to make America great again. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And God bless Donald J. Trump.
Love that. Yep. All right, what's this?
Look at this above my head. This is the 2030 apportionment forecast, which will be based off the 2030 census. So this is predicting if states will increase in electoral votes, decrease in electoral votes.
I've already seen something like
this. If you pay attention, every single state that's decreasing in electoral...
I'm going to skip it because we're well aware of it, and it's not really pertinent right now. I mean, it is, but it isn't. You know what I mean.
Our undercover people arrived at the tail end of the protest that evening, including myself.
Watchdog, how you doing? What's going on? It's Jay O'Connell, Watchdog. My fiance is a teacher.
Is she? What's she teach? What's she teach?
Special needs.
Where are we going? Where are we going? We're going to be ICE agents. Don't you have a thing to cover your face? Like this.
We heard chants of ICE out and fuck ICE.
ICE out. ICE out. Fuck ICE. Fuck ICE. Fuck ICE. Fuck ICE.
Hopefully the audience will forgive this reporter for participating in these chants in order to fit in. We found teachers, nurses, and union organizers all telling us, "We appreciate you, neighbor."
I appreciate your neighbor. Appreciate you, neighbor. I appreciate your neighbor.
A guy came by before and he stopped here. There was a bunch of young kids and they handed out weed to everybody. Really? Yeah. It was so cool. I gave all mine away, all but a little bit, because I wanted to at least try it.
You got anything better than weed?
Love. Are you a paid agitator? Just kidding.
While many, probably many of you, might think this is all due to some specific centralized funding source, what we found is a hodgepodge of various NGOs and nonprofits loosely tied together through ideology, funded in part by the government, featuring 501c3s with nonprofit tax returns, a variety of funding sources. But most of these people we found were actually true believers, there to live and die by their cause.
What is this about? Yeah, so we're independent social national organizations supporting the fight against ICE.
This woman, featured on a hidden camera, is Peggy Wang. Based in Boston, she works at Massachusetts College of Art and Design. Active in the Massachusetts Teachers Association, she participates in pro-Palestinian protests, and her job is currently being threatened for doing so. While this footage is hard to hear, Peggy Wang lists the issues that her organization gets involved in: immigration rights, abolishing ICE, stopping raids and deportations, justice for victims, and getting ICE out of cities like Minneapolis.
I thought you meant union work. Union work. Our unions definitely need to take up the fight against ICE, against the UN back in the genocide, but also fighting for reproductive rights, universal health care. The big part of that should be labor, workers' party. We need a real political representation for working class party. Okay, so is this a party? Organization, independent socialist group. Independent socialist group. I like that.
This other protester we secretly recorded talks about an organization called Make the Road New York. We've never heard of this organization, but apparently they have a budget of $30 million. They talk about one of the speakers that spoke earlier that day, April Veretti. April is the president of the SEIU labor union.
I mean, if you're interested in an immigrants' rights organization, you should look up Make the Road New York.
Make the Road New York?
Make the Road.
But who are you with?
I'm just with with the union.
Oh.
Yeah. SEIU, Service Employees International.
We looked at the tax returns of Make the Road New York and found they're a registered 501c3 that file a 990, and they received $16 million in grants.
Wow.
As cars drove by, the agitators would ride on top of the cars. One man's spoiler was broken off his car as one agitator tried to climb on board the car.
What happened? What was that? Accidentally broke his wing on his car. Oh, shit. Oh, they slapped the shit out of that wing right there.
One of the comments they made was, "There's no blood here, and you know there's no Trump people, there's no MAGA people, because if there was, there would be blood."
We had one person. Oh, I had to have it. You have any ashes drying through here today? Nope, not yet. See any blood on the ground? No, I don't see any blood. That's how we know there's no fascists. They haven't showed up. They haven't showed up.
One of the advantages of it being so cold is we were able to cover every single part of our skin. But these conditions were truly dangerous. Many of our DSLR cameras actually froze. Our hidden cameras malfunctioned in minutes because it was so cold.
You make this I is did. Your thing? I made it for the Powderhorn Art Festival because I want to melt ice and get them the fuck out of here.
It's not melting.
Oh, it's like what? Oh, you know why? Because it's so cold out.
Yeah.
And we watched water freeze in seconds. A bottle of water could quickly be turned into a weapon.
Negative 17-degree weather. Let's see what happens to water. Let's see how fast that freezes. 1, 2, 3. It's already frozen.
Wow. Kind of hard to look away from that stuff, see what's going on. Yeah, we're aware of him. He's not the peaceful guy they say he is. Then and now. This is why we stand up for Trump.
I think it's a very mean life. I would love and I would dedicate my life to this country, but I see it as being a mean life. And I also see it as somebody with strong views and somebody with the kind of views that are maybe a little bit unpopular, which may be right, but may be unpopular.
I am your voice. So to every parent who dreams for their child and every child who dreams for their future, I say these words to you tonight. I am with you, I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We will make America strong again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again. God bless you and good night.
Great video.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you see, that's the part about sizing him up in this interview when he was younger. He doesn't sound like he's joking. He doesn't sound like he's playing around. He sounds like he's very serious about what he wants to do and what he's capable of doing and how nasty the game is. He was right. They almost killed him for it. But my God, the history books are going to be, favorable towards him. He has a shot at going down as the third greatest president. I think he's fighting for that. It's going to be tough to be the second, but I think he's on track to be the third greatest president of all time.
All right. We are well over time. We got to move on to Elon Musk. Hopefully there's nothing else really awesome in here. 22 hours ago. Waltz, Rage Up. Let's see. Man, he just posted a lot today. Oh, I remember this. This is seal number 2 right here.
Do you remember what it was like when the 2020 election was rigged and stolen?
Yeah.
Do you remember all the bullshit stories people told you about how the fraudulent election would be overturned? Do you remember the symbols of tyranny when fences went up around D.C. for Joe Biden's inauguration? Do you remember watching fuel and food prices skyrocket in a matter of months? Do you remember watching our borders being invaded by a virtual army of unidentified criminals? Do you remember watching our nation get systematically destroyed for 4 years by the Joe Biden Autopen administration?
Yeah.
Do you remember longing for the days of winning when we had Donald Trump in the White House? Do you remember thinking he was going to die when the bullet aimed at his brain only grazed his ear? Do you remember rejoicing after witnessing the miracle that saved his life? Do you remember celebrating the epic landslide victory in November of 2024? This is what you hoped for. This is what you prayed for. This is what you voted for. So why are you questioning every decision he makes now that he's back in office? God didn't save his life so he could make mistakes. He knows what he's doing. Maybe it's time to shut the fuck up and let him cook. This has been a public service announcement paid for by the Dilly Meme team.
Oh my goodness. Gosh. Wow. Some gold on there. Man, we could probably spend the rest of the night on that. Let's move on. We got other stuff we got to do. Moving on to Elon Musk. See, hopefully he's as entertaining, because I hate to move away from Trump after posting such gold. 4 hours ago, with the release of version... Okay, that's Grok. We're going to skip the Grok stuff. See, from Sky News, Sebastian... Oh, let's might as well watch the video.
Everyone in my position tries to move some bit of their body to see if there is any form of recovery. But now I think about moving my hand, and it's cool to see that when I think about moving my hand, something actually happens.
It does seem quite magical.
No, it looks magical and it feels magical. So yeah, that, you could compare it to that. And then you put it over my head.
This? Okay.
And eventually you will see the charger go green. There you go. Look. If you hold it to my head right there, this means this is how we charge it. And right now, technically it's charging.
So I'm charging the chip.
That is exactly what you're doing.
If you don't mind telling me, how did it happen?
I went home to visit my family in Venezuela, and as a holiday treat, we did a bit of diving. And when I dived, I hit the floor and hit my head, and alongside breaking my neck, also broke my front 2 teeth. And yeah, that's how I started. For me, at the beginning was first being able to talk, being able to eat. Then I started looking at, okay, what can I actually do?
Amazing technology, not the mark of the beasts.
Today was the first time I actually see him use it, and it was mind-blowing. You can see how the level of control that he has, which is akin to someone using, a mouse, and even faster.
So I think I'm moving my hand to the right, to the left, think about clicking my fingers, and the technology just understands what I want to do, and it does it.
So you've been playing chess as well with this?
Yes, I have. One of the first things I tried when I got the chip was to see how does this work with chess, and it works exactly as you would think. Being able to actually do the moves myself instead of asking someone else to do the moves for me. I get to enjoy playing, get to enjoy playing against friends, get to enjoy playing against other people who have no clue I'm playing with my brain, which makes it so interesting.
All right, moving on. That is pretty cool technology. Let's see, Wilfred Riley, amazing and typical chart. The entire argument for mass migration, of course, rests on the assumption that all or most migrants will positively contribute to society, but this is not true. It's complicated. Denmark's average net contribution to public finances. Other Western immigrants, Danish origin, and MENAPT immigrants. Other Western immigrants. So, I mean, I don't know exactly what this is saying, but you can see the overall chart is trending strongly down. I assume it's saying that they don't contribute in the way that it was assumed that they would. Okay, fair enough. See, from X Daily News, X announces partnership with Warner Brothers Discovery for the 2026 Winter Olympics in Milano Cortina. The deal brings exclusive Olympics content to X users in Europe and the UK, with brands getting access to in-game clips via X Amplify offering. Interesting. Okay, what are you saying? With the release of Grok 1.0, Grok manages not generating more images than everyone else combined. Okay. Rapid improvements. Let's see. Long supported voter ID and ensuring only citizens vote for our elections. It's going to get so hard to trust what you see on the internet. I mean, we're already there. We really are. Yep. Let's see. From Faraz Abidi. Was lucky to get early access. Grok. Share links. Tim Waltz. Funniest part is that body cams were a marquee demand of BLM, but in practice they have been a political boomerang. Instead of validating the left's sweeping narrative, body cam footage has completely undercut it and made one inconvenient truth impossible to evade. The behavior on the streets is worse, uglier, more chaotic, barbaric, and more morally depraved than even the most cynical racist ever imagined. One of the cleanest backfires in modern politics. Good. It just goes to show how ignorant and stupid they are. That even the things that they thought they must. What it does is it proves delusion. You know, they're delusional, thinking these things aren't happening, and so they wanted to prove it, and it backfired on them. Good. See, breaking for the first time ever, more than half the cars sold in China. Okay. Let's see. They've gone full retard. Never go full retard. Oh, this is just a meme movie clip.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there were times when I was doing Jack that I actually felt retarded, like really retarded. Oh, yeah. I mean, I brushed my teeth retarded. I rode bus retarded.
Damn.
In a weird way, I had to sort of just free myself up to believe that it was okay to be stupid or dumb.
To be a moron.
Yeah.
To be moronical.
Exactly. To be a moron.
An imbecile.
Yeah.
Like the dumbest motherfucker that ever lived.
When I was playing the character.
When you was a character.
Yeah, I mean, as Jack, definitely.
Yeah. Jack. Stupid ass Jack. Trying to come back from that.
In a weird way, it was almost like I had to sort of fool my mind into believing that it wasn't retarded. And by the end of the whole thing, I was like, wait a minute, you know? I flushed so much out, how am I gonna jumpstart it up again? It's just like...
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
You was farting in bathtubs and laughing your ass off. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Simple Jack thought he was smart. Or rather, didn't think he was retarded, so he can't afford to play retarded, being a smart actor. Playing a guy who ain't smart but thinks he is, that's tricky.
Tricky.
It's like working with Mercury. It's high.
Sorry. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. All right, Grokopedia. Let's see. In parallel, we are working on designing 10x capability that will scale 100x with 3D integration. We are also making great progress on entirely automating surgical procedures, bringing up more high volume. Congrats to the Neuralink team for helping many people who have lost use of their body with our telepathy implant that enables computers by simply thinking. This is one of the reasons why this can't be the mark of the beast is scale. Right now, I mean, while what they call quickly is like 10 years, 5 to 10 years. They've only got 20 people on this thing. Like, if you're calling this thing the mark of the beast, this thing would have to be implemented globally. Granted, it could be after large numbers of the planet have been lost due to various trumpets and bull judgments and disasters and stuff like that. But still, you're talking about millions. This thing is not ready for millions. It's ready for hundreds. You know? Hundreds, and then it'll be thousands. Then it'll be tens of thousands. But it's still, before they like really massively are able to serve those who need it, it's going to take time.
Preddy did not deserve to die. The officer who shot him should be fired. Chrissy Nome should be fired. ICE needs to be reined in. Maybe you disagree with me on some of that. Sure. But honestly, I don't want to spend the next 3 years pausing and rewinding clips to do play-by-play on whose fault it is.
Fair.
Because there's a bigger question here. Do Democrats want humane deportations or no deportations at all? On January 13th of last year, while my city burned, Gavin Newsom committed $50 million of our taxpayer money to fight Trump's deportations. Before Trump was even in office, California gives free healthcare to 1.7 million illegal immigrants, while actual citizens can't afford theirs. Now, the mayor of Minneapolis says he will not enforce federal immigration law. The resistance started before the deportations. Every U.S. citizen killed by ICE has been in a Democrat-controlled area, and the red areas have more ICE arrests than the blue ones, where Democrats refuse to cooperate. 24% of ICE arrests happened in Texas. Around 1% happened in Minnesota. But no citizen has died in Texas. The chaos is only happening in blue states. Why is that? But you know what's not red or blue? The fact that both parties are controlled by corporations who rely on cheap, illegal labor for profits. That's why, despite us giving amnesty to 3 million illegal immigrants in 1986, we now have tens of millions more. Look, these people deserve to be treated humanely.
Fair.
I'm open to different solutions. I'm even willing to pay them to leave and land on their feet.
So to be fair, though, is Trump recognizes that as well, and that's why he's focusing on the worst of the worsts. I don't even think we've gotten to the ones that are questionable, that none of us have a problem being in the country that are helping. It's the rapists, the murderers, the anarchists, the ones who are here, the ones who we don't know their backgrounds, who are released from prisons or who come from death cult religions. Those are the ones that are the problem. Those are the ones that need to be addressed immediately, and people need to stop protecting them.
But they aren't entitled to be in America. They aren't entitled to free healthcare when actual citizens can't afford theirs. They aren't entitled to stay here when the only difference between them and the millions of people waiting in line is that they were willing to cut the line. The vote said deport. The law said deport. The commander-in-chief said deport. Errors with deportations don't mean we don't do deportations. We don't need to abolish ICE. We need to discipline them. And if you want to oppose ICE, film them, sue them, vote against them. But for the love of God, resist them with your voice, not your body. Trump should rein in ICE because it's the right thing to do. But even if ICE...
And I'd argue that is what he's doing, because he's had the opportunity several times to implement the Insurrection Act, and he has not done so. He still continues to take the high road, in my opinion. I don't know. That could just be me.
Executes perfectly. Will Democrats start cooperating? Or is the goal not really humane deportations, but no deportations at all? If you'd like to support this work...
Let's see, a pile of human bones and skulls at Majdanek concentration camp near Lublin, Poland in 1944. Ooh. When I first saw the picture, I just saw this part. Oh, man. Stephen Colbert, do not compare ICE or border control agents to Nazis. That's an unfair comparison. The Nazis were willing to show their faces. Thanks. Dude, you're not funny anymore. If you ever were.
If you're going to create a company, the first thing you should try to do is create a working prototype. Everything looks great on PowerPoint. you can make anything work on PowerPoint. But if you have an actual demonstration article, even if it's in primitive form, that's much more effective for convincing people. If you're going to create...
Yeah, and it also helps the naysayers, because there's a lot of people who don't have the capability to... I don't know if you guys know this. It's can't remember the real name. It's like aplaschophagia or something like that, to where there are literally... And some of you might actually be even watching the show today, but there are those who can visualize things, and I'm one of them, in their head. I can literally look at a wall and work because I can see clearly in my brain, programming code. it freaks my wife out because she'll just see me staring off into space, ask me what I'm doing, and I'm literally working. I'll be working on a problem or figuring out what I'm going to do with a particular function or a program. But there are some people who don't have that capability to visualize in their head. And more often than not, those are the ones that will often be the naysayers against something because they can't visualize what it is that you're proposing, like to a solution. By having something that actually works, it's a great way to get those people who don't have those capabilities on board with what it is that you're doing. So this is such a fantastic piece of advice to where if you're trying to do something and you're coming up against naysayers, don't be disheartened by it, because there are some people who literally just cannot imagine what it is that you can. It's the beauty of life. We're all different. People are different like that. All right. Was lucky to get early. Okay. Grok stuff. All right. What is this?
Here's a list of the many tax increases and proposals Democrats in Virginia are considering passing. They include additional local sales tax in all Virginia counties and cities, new personal property tax on electric leaf blowers and electric landscaping equipment.
Can you guys hear that?
Employer tax, gun and ammunition tax, new income tax bracket.
It's very quiet, but they've got the text up here.
A delivery tax. This would hit you if you make an order on Amazon, Uber Eats, or an order that includes UPS, FedEx delivery, etc. here in Northern Virginia. There's also a tax.
So he's talking about Virginia tax increases. So Virginia Democrats under fire after proposed tax increases for literally everything. Probably because the blue states are being cut off by the government because of their egregious fraud and sanctuary city status. Trump warned that this would happen, and unfortunately, they're going to take it out on the people.
They're looking out for events, concerts, an investment income tax, storage facility tax.
It's not going to end well. Hear from Sebastian, one of the first people. We already watched that. Let's see. If these races were reversed, it would be the #1 story in America for a month. But this literally gets zero attention since a white woman is dead. Yeah, this would absolutely be worldwide headline news if the races were reversed. Yeah. Jimmy Kimmel won't cry about this. Neither will Natalie Portman or Elizabeth Warren. They won't even mention it. In fact, they don't even care about this killing at all. We know why. They are cruel hypocrites. Any government that puts the rights of fake asylum seekers above their own children being brutally raped or killed is psychologically evil. Psychotically evil. Yeah. And utterly illegitimate. Repeal the Human Rights Act. Leave the Refugee Convention. Man. Yeshua cannot return soon enough. Your next movie will be shot online. Give it a shot. Oh, Grok Imagine, of course. Just another day in the UK, an Afghan national abducted a 12-year-old girl from the street before repeatedly raping her and taking photographs of the attacks. So I've been learning about Islam and Muslims, thanks to Fury sending me content to start learning about this. And one of the things I learned today is that they encourage spreading their seed by any means necessary. So you have this religious group that part of their belief system is that leads them to behave like this. That is not acceptable. That is not compatible with Torah. In fact, it is contrary to Torah. And it seems as though this is where we're leading with this beast system that is now rising. We can see it taking foothold around the world and what it's leading towards. And this is what we're up against. You don't want to be left here. So you want to go with Jesus. You want to accept Yeshua and him as your Messiah so that he will take you with him when he returns. And that goes for Jews too. Is Jesus is their Messiah. Is your Messiah if you're Jewish. Jesus is your Messiah whether you accept him or not. But this is the kind of system that is coming, to where part of their religious belief system is to do this kind of thing. It's terrible. Let's see. Grokpedia. More Grok videos. Let's see, just images. What's this? Starship will likely grow another 20 meters over time, reaching up to 140 meters. Very cool. Grok, so much Grok stuff today. What gives? More Grok. Acropolis in the snow. Probably Grok. SpaceX successfully caught a rocket booster mid-air for the second time in history. Very cool. I heard, I haven't actually seen the post. If anybody has one, would you mind sending it to me? But I heard the United States came out and admitted that we have directed energy weapons and that we can, shoot fire from space. Has anybody else heard that? I've been looking for a video to confirm that. Granted, I haven't put a ton of time into it, but I have spent a little bit of energy looking into that. Because I'm trying to figure out who has the ability to call fire down from heaven. And that's a big suspicious. I wonder if that's what it's talking about, directed energy weapons. Let's see, we spent the past 3 months polishing. Okay, this is models, Grok. Describe her voice in one word.
Sous le béton, maman, dis-le-moi, où va-t-on? Est-ce qu'un jour on sait vraiment? Ou est-ce qu'on fait semblant tout le temps? Où va le cœur quand il se perd dans les doutes et les hivers? Pourquoi les jours se ressemblent? Est-ce qu'on finit par voir ce qu'on assemble? Maman, dis-le-moi,
She has an amazing voice. That room they're in, too, is pretty awesome with the echo and the reverb on that. Kids got some beautiful voices. It reminds me when I was growing up, I was a choir boy. And we had met the, what is it? It's the Kodak Choir, where it was a group of young men who literally were training to sing their entire, or young boys, training to sing their entire lives for that sound. I see your true colors shining through. The choir that actually sung that, and just absolutely amazing. Children have got beautiful voices if they put their heart into it. Unlike my daughter, who doesn't like to sing. Let's see. By 2030, Tesla will officially discontinue the Model S and Model X. June 30th, 2026. Oh, I love the Model X. Since the Model S rolled out in 2012 and the X in 2016, about 740,000 of them have been delivered. Each one helping define it. Well, I mean, I guess that means the value of our car will go up. Heartbreaking. What are they going to replace it with, I wonder? Neuralink. Let's see. I am sad to hear that okay. Man, just not a lot of gems on Elon's post today. Should have stuck with Trump. We got 3 minutes left on Elon. Let's just kind of skip through here to see if anything stands out. What's this?
Fun little fact, Tim Walz can't stop ICE from enforcing immigration law in Minnesota because the Obama administration sued the state of Arizona, and the Supreme Court ruled that the feds have ultimate authority over immigration enforcement.
Good.
Karma, man.
Haha. Apparently, Spain just legalized 500,000 illegal aliens to defeat the far right. It's not even secret anymore. By legalizing 500,000 illegals under the guise of defeating the far right, Pedro Sanchez is essentially dropping the mask. This is electoral engineering. Yup. Yeah, the S is awesome. It's a little too small for me. I'm a bigger guy. The S is very cool. It's very sporty. We went with our first Tesla was a Tesla Model X because it's more of a sedan. It's a little bigger, a little more roomy, a little bit bigger in there. And then the Cybertruck is really roomy. There's a lot of room in the Cybertruck. I don't know. Maybe we'll keep our X now that they're not going to produce them anymore. Ideally, we like the Cybertruck so much, we probably will end up with two of them because the wife and I are always fighting over who gets to drive it. Elon Musk on the Tesla cab today. It does not have a steering wheel or pedals. It either drives itself or it does not drive. Well, there you go. That's a move from Apple. Just remove it. They'll figure it out. They did that with the headphone jack. You guys remember that? Just going to put our foot down. Let's just remove it's either going to drive or it ain't. It kind of ups the ante. The future is here. Huh.
15-year-old daughter was raped. She was raped in a bathroom by a boy wearing girls' clothes, and the Loudoun County School Board covered it up because it would have interfered with their transgendered policy during Pride Month. And that man, Scott Smith, because he went to a school board and tried to defend his daughter's rights, was condemned internationally. Do you apologize to Scott Smith and his 15-year-old daughter, Judge?
Senator, anyone whose
this guy.
Child was raped is the most horrific crime I can imagine, and is certainly entitled and protected by the First Amendment to protest to their school board about this.
But he was cited by the School Board Association as a domestic terrorist, which we now know that letter and those reports were the basis for your...
Senator,
that's wrong. Shameful. Judge, this is shameful. This testimony, your directive, your performance is shameful.
That's not...
Thank God you are not on the Supreme Court. You should resign in disgrace, Judge. 15-year-old daughter was raped. She was raped in a bathroom by a boy wearing girls' clothes, and the Loudoun County School Board covered it up.
Wow. I remember that, too. It seems as though that kind of stuff's on the decline since Donald Trump came into power. That's awesome. Billionaire Kamath Palihapitiya, once a mega donor to the Democrat Party, says he is totally brainwashed by New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC. Yeah, but he believed every lie about President Trump as soon as he came down the escalator. Over the course of 6 or 7 years, I realized that some of those fundamental things that I was told about him were totally false. And it started with the Charlottesville lie. Then I started to go down the rabbit hole. Amen.
You went from being a large Democrat donor to now a very outspoken proponent on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah.
When you are so influential to other VCs and other people with high net worth here in
I wonder if these are the wheat that have been allowed to, you got the wheat and the tares. We're gonna actually read these parables tonight. But the reason why the harvest didn't happen sooner is to not harm some of the wheat. And I wonder if it's not some of these ones that were so close with the tares that they couldn't be separated until the timing was right. I almost wonder if that's not why things aren't happening the way they are right now, is it's a delicate process to maintain, the integrity of people. People are doing stupid things, because we live in a deceptive world, because we have an enemy who deceives, who lies, because we have this these evil people in power and the control over the media that manipulates people, and you got to gently move them away from that. And it's a progressive amount of them lying constantly and seeing their lies fall flat, and then people telling the truth constantly. suffering as a result of it, but maintaining, their integrity. And I think it helps people like this wake up.
In California, and you've really shaped their public opinion and public perception. How did you get there yourself? Was there a moment you woke up and you're like, okay, it's all different?
There was. This is not about politics for me. It's about the truth. There was a moment where I was basically like everybody else and pretty brainwashed. My media diet was very much the same as everybody else's. I read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. I watched a little bit of CNN, a little bit of CNBC, a little bit of MSNBC, a little bit of CBS. Economist every now and then you encounter it on a plane, and you think you know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a perception of Donald Trump initially from the moment he walked down the staircase in Trump Tower to announce. And then over the course of 6 or 7 years, I realized that some of those fundamental things that I was told about him were just totally false. And there was enough content online where I was almost afraid, but it started with Charlottesville. I was almost afraid to look at it because I'm like, I think I was lied to. Mm-hmm. And then I saw it. I saw what he said, but then I saw the portrayal. I had originally believed that portrayal until I saw the truth. And then I just started to go down that rabbit hole. So for me, it was an evolution where I was like, I can't believe I'm being lied to by this group of people whose sole responsibility is to hold truth to power. The key word there is truth to power, not your perception or your desires. And I just think that red pilled me, I guess, in a way.
That's awesome. All right. These are some older posts. It looks like, what is this? Eric Ad. Okay, one more. Let's see what this is about.
New York City is facing a serious fiscal crisis. There is a massive fiscal deficit in our city's budget to the tune of at least $12 billion. We did not arrive at this place by accident. This crisis has a name and a chief architect. In the words of the Jackson 5, it's as easy as ABC. This is the Adams budget crisis. In 2025, under New York City...
Wow. All right, let's call it there. We got to get into our addressing the house of Israel.
Awake, awake, O Zion, arise, shake off the dust, lift your eyes, the chains that...
All right, we are going to do another Tovia Singer. I really want to get his attention. I'm reaching out to them. I'll be reaching out again this weekend, trying to get on their show to get a conversation with him. But in the meantime, I want to draw his attention to the proof that Yeshua is the Messiah. Yes, I know you think I'm crazy. You think you've handled every single argument and considered all the data, but I don't think you've seen what we have to share. John 14:29, he told us these things were going to happen before they were happened so that when they do, you would believe. And we have mountains of data to prove that he prophesied about these things. He's the Son of God. His Father told him these things. He told us, he told his disciples who wrote it down and told us so that when they begin to happen, we will believe. And I think that is the greatest testimony that he is the Messiah. And this was an interesting video talking about, because he gets into Exodus 20, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. And it gets to the point of, can Jesus pay for my sins? And this is something that I enjoy talking about because I think it's really relevant to understand what it is that Jesus accomplished. Because so many people, they have this general overview of, there's this guy, I'm a bad person, I'm a sinner from birth, and this guy can't, this is, what Tovia Singer mockingly addresses many times with Christian mentality, and it's because neither one of them really understand it. So this is a good opportunity to address some of those things. So let's get into this.
All right, Mr. Bill, you are live on the air.
Can you hear me?
I think that worked.
Yes.
Yep, you're good to go now. Okay, Bill, go right ahead with your questions, sir. Thank you for your call.
Yeah, hi, Rabbi. I appreciate your work.
I have, there's a past, well, first of all, bearing in mind that one man's not responsible for another man's sins. I see a passage where it says,
okay, so I don't know why he's making that statement, because both Jew and Christian, I think, will agree that Adam in the beginning sinned, and as a result, I don't know what the full Jewish belief on this is, but I think we would agree that Adam was told not to take of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and he did. And as a result, there were consequences, such as the curse on the earth, the curse of having to work to eat, and those sins we're still dealing with to this day. So I don't know if that's a fully true statement that one man's sin isn't inherited, because there is a degree of inheritance when the sin is it has such a global impact, especially on your children. And I think that's really central to understanding. So there, and I think we're going to talk about this a little bit more, because he does bring up about sin in the blood, and I want to address that. So I'll let him ask the question, and then we'll address it.
that a man's transgressions would be bestowed to his sons to the third and fourth generation. And
Yes.
I never understood that. And with a side note,
Sure.
there is a TED Talk I watched, and it's certainly not a religious program, but they studied DNA, and they said there's nothing you could do that would alter your DNA or change it, except one thing they found. They studied 126 people on death row for hideous crimes, and much to their surprise, they all had a mark on their DNA, and more surprising, it was transferred to their sons to the third and fourth generation. But the question, I guess, was, the passage of a man's transgression being bestowed upon his sons to his third and fourth generation. It doesn't really seem like it's in alignment with you can't be responsible for another man's sins.
Okay, I have to stop you there. In Genesis, Adam made the statement that a son will leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and the two will become one flesh. I believe that is indicating producing children, because that's exactly what happens. If that's not what he meant, it's still a reality that I don't think anybody can really dispute. Men carry the seed, women carry the eggs. When combined, the women will carry their child to term, generally 9 months, and then will give birth to a child, meaning the two, man and woman, cleave together and become one flesh. In other words, they produce another human being as a result of that. That human being can then leave father and mother, cleave unto his wife. The two will become one and produce children, become one flesh. It is the process of multiplying, which is the first command chronologically given to Adam: be fruitful and multiply. Now, if you insert into that process new genetic material, you have now introduced something genetically into the blood, and that's why the book of Enoch is important, because it implies, well, not implies, it outright says it, that another being, not of the bloodline of Adam, came down to Earth. It's vague on where it's from. Like, are these aliens? Are these other humans? Are they, beings that survived other disaster cycles on the planets? What we know about them from the book of Enoch, which was in the Dead Sea Scrolls, is that, and has been preserved arguably longer than some other manuscripts that we have in Ethiopia. There is very strong evidence that the book of Enoch is a genuine manuscript, not a forgery, and that the information is important, and it's even quoted in the Old Testament. But it's such a perfect parallel record because it describes what the possible first sin was, in that you had some other being that is genetically compatible of producing children with Adam and Eve. They came down, they took wives unto themselves, and they produced children known as Nephilim. And I think I have sufficient evidence to study it further that in the process of that female Nephilim would have resulted from that union as well. So that process that Adam stated, when a son leaves his father and mother and cleaves unto his wife, the two shall become one flesh, is true when you introduce another genetic bloodline, another Y chromosome. Because the way, in order for it to work, it has to be this way, I believe. Just because the Nephilim, just because the Watchers might have all been male, doesn't mean they were not capable of producing female children. It's not written anywhere. This is based on just taking the available information. Actually, it comes from running simulations using genetic information, and it was the simulation that actually implied that there would have been female Nephilim. But that explains how, Eve could have taken from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, produced children with another genetic bloodline, and then given that same fruit to her husband, Adam, so that he also could produce fruit with another bloodline. In other words, both of them were making babies with Nephilim. So sin being in the bloodline, that could be the sin. Now, and I think that is vitally important to understand Yeshua and what he did, because after those things happened, if that indeed is what happened for the first sin, if that's what God meant when he said, of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day you eat thereof, thou shalt surely die. By mixing the bloodline, it polluted the bloodline so that they no longer had eternal life. Whether that means I'm of the opinion that it severed the connection with God. Fury actually sent me a video that I recently saw where somebody is, man, maybe we should watch that video. Let's watch that video. Let me go find that video, but because it applies to this situation in that, and it's one of those things. It's like once you hear it, you can't, or once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it goes to my argument about us, Jesus came to build the temple and that we are the temple of God. Well, the Garden of Eden was likely the first temple of God where God dwelt within us. So let's watch some of this video. We may not watch all of it. I'll put the link into the description so you guys can watch the whole thing. It's really not that long.
So everyone's heard of the story of the Garden of Eden, right? God creates Adam, puts him in this perfect garden, paradise. Then he creates Eve. They eat of the forbidden fruit. They get kicked out. Pretty straightforward, right? Except here's the thing. When you actually read Genesis 2 and 3 in Hebrew, and when you start to compare it to other ancient Near Eastern texts, and when you look at how the rest of the Bible references Eden, it's actually not describing a garden. It's actually describing a temple, specifically God's cosmic mountain, his throne room on earth, where heaven and earth actually overlap. And Adam wasn't a gardener, he was actually a priest. And once you see this, you can't unsee it, because suddenly the tabernacle makes sense. The temple makes sense in the New Jerusalem in Revelation, where the tree of life shows up again. It's not just going back.
And I would add that what Jesus came to start building with us as the temple makes sense.
To Eden. It's Eden finally fulfilling what it was always meant to be. I'm going to rely heavily on Dr. Michael Heiser's work on this one, specifically the unseen realm, because he actually lays out the case that Eden was never meant to be read as a literal botanical garden. It's cosmic geography, a term that I'll talk about, and it's where God dwells with humanity.
Yeah.
And if that's true, then the fall isn't just about disobedience, it's actually about humanity losing access to God's presence. It's about being cast out of the temple, and understanding that actually changes everything. All right, so let's start with Genesis 2, because there are details in here that most people just read right over. The geography here is strange. In Genesis 2:8, it says, the Lord God had planted a garden in the east, in Eden. The garden is in Eden, so Eden must be this larger reason. That's the first clue. Verse 10 says, a river watering the garden flowed from Eden. Rivers flow downward. And so if the river is from Eden to the garden, Eden is elevated, therefore Eden must be higher. And then it says that this river actually splits into 4 different headwaters: Pishon, Gihon, the Tigris, and the Euphrates. Geographically, this doesn't work because you can't have one river split into the Tigris and Euphrates because both of them are separate systems. It seems like this is describing a mountain because in Near Eastern cosmology, the god's dwelling was always on a mountain, and from that mountain, life-giving waters flowed to the world. Eden is on that mountain. And then we have to notice the priestly language here. In Genesis 2, verse 15, God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. The Hebrew is abad and shamar, work and guard. These same 2 words appear together in Numbers 3, verses 7 through 8, when describing what the Levites do in the tabernacle. They are to perform their priestly duties by doing the work in the tabernacle. So Adam isn't gardening, he's performing priestly services, and he's serving and guarding a sacred space. It's also a place where God walks. Genesis 3 verse 8 says, the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden. God seemed to be physically present, and this is where he dwells on earth. And when Adam and Eve sin...
And there's a direct parallel to this with Yeshua and what he accomplished. And the reason why he heard from God when others hadn't. If you do a study of spirit upon people, people had to have spirit upon them, but it was something that could be removed. I'm thinking of Elijah and Elisha. Elisha, however you want to pronounce it. Elisha had asked for a double portion of the spirit that Elijah had. So it was a portioned, measured thing. With Jesus, it wasn't. It was an internal reality. So when he said, I and my Father are one, he was speaking of that internal reality because his temple was pure and God could dwell within him. Well, what he did with his blood is he made it so that we could cleanse our temple and God could dwell within us again. When you understand that, then you begin to understand Genesis 1:1. You begin to understand why the blood being pure is important and how sin it can be in the blood, especially if you're intermingling it with impure blood, something unclean. So it's why cleanliness with animals is so important. Thinking back to what we had mentioned earlier this week about after the fall, after they had been kicked out of the garden, God made clothes of animal skin, which implies sacrifice. That was the first sacrifice of an animal, the spilling of blood in order to cover for the uncleanness.
They hide because they know God is coming. This is his sanctuary. And what about the cherubim, those cute little babies that aren't so cute after all? Well, verse 24 says he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. Where else do cherubim appear?
These are some of the answers I'm looking forward to from Yeshua to understand what some of those things meant.
Well, on the mercy seat of the ark, in the Holy of Holies, and around God's throne. Cherubim mark the boundary between earth and the divine realm. So they are the guardians to the entrance of God's holy space. When Genesis 3:24 says that cherubim guard the entrance to Eden, it's straight out telling us that Eden is God's holy of holies and humanity has been barred from entering. And with that, there's a pattern to notice here. So let's put this all together. Eden is elevated, or a mountain. A river flows from it, life-giving water. Adam serves and guards it, having that priestly language. God walks there, and cherubim guard the temple entrance. So this isn't a garden. This is God's temple on earth. Now here is where Heiser's work gets really, really important, because in the ancient world, the gods were the ones who lived on cosmic mountains. And this was universal. Mesopotamian gods lived on mountains. Ziggurats were artificial mountains. Baal dwelt on Mount Zaphon, then the Greeks on Mount Olympus. The cosmic mountain was the center of the world, the highest point, and the source of life-giving water where divine and human realms met. And interestingly enough, Eden fits every single characteristic. Another good example of this is Mount Sinai. For example, in Exodus 19, it says, put limits for the people around the mountain. Whoever touches the mountain is to be put to death. That has boundaries, just like Eden has boundaries. Cherubim guarding the entrance. In Exodus 24, it says, Moses and the elders saw the God of Israel, but God did not raise his hand against these leaders. They saw God and they ate and drank. So they're in God's presence on the mountain. And that's kind of an Eden moment. And then God says in Exodus 25, have them make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them. Make this tabernacle exactly like the pattern I will show you. And what pattern do we think that is? You guessed it, the pattern of Eden. And that becomes even more interesting when you realize that the tabernacle was essentially a portable version of Eden. The first way we know that is because the entrance faces east. So for example, cherubim are guarding the east side in the Garden of Eden, and in the tabernacle, the entrance faces the east. Another point about the cherubim is in Eden, cherubim guard the entrance, and on the tabernacle, cherubim are on the ark. And it is the veil that is separating the holy place from the most holy place, and that is embroidered with cherubim. You couldn't get past the cherubim into Eden, and you can't get past the cherubim into the most holy place. Another point about the tabernacle is the lampstand. In Eden, we have the tree of life. In the tabernacle, the menorah has 7 branches with almond blossoms, buds, and flowers. So the lampstand is a stylized tree because it's representing the tree of life. Another clue is the presence of God. For example, in Eden, God walks in the garden, and in the tabernacle,
so that's an interesting thing to point out there, that the menorah represents the tree of life. And we know from Revelation that the menorah, the candlesticks, represent the 7 churches that follow the Lamb. There's an underlying reality there about the tree of life being in the life of the flesh is in the blood. So when God told Adam not to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, is a separate tree. That's another bloodline, potentially another bloodline, is what I'm suggesting. So whether, what I wanted you to hear from him is he's pointing out a lot of the temple language and temple imagery, and there has to be a link to that in what Jesus is actually building. I believe Jesus is getting us back to what was original in the beginning, to where it's, whether it was a physical temple where Adam and Eve, worked and, tilled the ground and took care of, whether it was a temple, a garden. But the point is that is where God dwelled. Something happened to where God was no longer dwelling within that, and they were clothed. So there was so something happened. There was a temporary solution. What I would suggest is probably Adam and Eve and their children were the place where God dwelled. And when those watchers, that other tree of knowledge of good and evil, came in and introduced corruption in the bloodline, then it was unclean, and God could no longer dwell there anymore. So that's how we have blood. The sin is in the blood, why it caused problems, and why you've got so much of the law with cleanliness and sacrifice, covering of blood, shedding of blood, cleansing of blood, and then you've got the perfect sacrifice who actually, takes the sin upon itself and then restarts the building of that temple. And that's what we've been doing for the last 2,000 years, is building that temple where God could once again dwell.
God says, I will dwell among them. In Exodus 40, the glory fills the tabernacle, so Moses can't even enter it.
So, and hopefully those of you who are smart are wondering, well, how does that apply to the end times with the Antichrist? Because those who don't really read the scripture, who just like telling stories, they're looking for a real person to go into a temple and call himself God, when that's what the serpent did when he deceived Eve, is he said, God does not know that in the day you eat thereof, you will be like gods, right? That's what the serpent does, is he gets into the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. This is one of the reasons why I point out that the man of sin, the son of perdition, could be a belief. It could be a spirit that actually tries to dwell within us, taking the place of God, not necessarily a man who goes into a physical temple declaring himself that he is God.
And so the whole point of this was to recreate Eden. God was dwelling with his people again. But unfortunately, there are barriers now. Curtains, cherubim, rituals, because humanity, unfortunately, is no longer innocent. Solomon's temple actually goes further than this. In 1 Kings 6, we read that the temple walls are carved with cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. There's palm trees, flowers. It sounds like the temple was decorated to look like a garden. Ezekiel 47 says that water flows from the temple, trees grow on both sides, and leaves grow for healing. That sounds like Eden-type language, because the river from Eden is now flowing from the temple. And interestingly enough, where does all this show up again? In Revelation 22, it says, the river of the water of life flowing from the throne of God. On each side of the river stood the tree of life, and the leaves of the tree are for healing the nations.
Yep.
The New Jerusalem is Eden restored, and the tree of life is back, and God is going to end up dwelling with humanity without any barriers, without the temple, even because Revelation 21 says the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. And you might be wondering, well, why isn't there a temple? Well, because the whole city is God's dwelling place. It's all back to Eden. And so if Eden is God's temple, then what is Adam's role exactly? Well, the first thing to note is that he was made in the image of God. Genesis 1 says, let us make mankind in our image so that they may rule. And something to note about this is that in the ancient world, kings set up statues or images of themselves in conquered territories to represent their authority. So humanity is God's image on earth. We represent his authority. We are his vice regents. We are his co-conspirators. I can probably find a better word there. But, whatever. You get it. Where are we supposed to rule from? The temple. Adam and Eve are the first priest kings meant to rule the earth from God's holy mountain. And another thing that comes up is the tree of knowledge and good and evil. In Genesis 2, it says, you must not eat from the tree of knowledge and good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die. And honestly, for like a long time, what is the knowledge of good and evil? That's something I've been wondering this whole time. Deuteronomy gives us some clues. In verse 39, it says, children who do not have the knowledge of good and evil. 2 Samuel 14, I think, says the king is discerning good and evil. It seems to be about moral autonomy, the ability to determine for yourself what good and evil is. So God is saying that you're not ready for that. This is wisdom that belongs to God and God only. And if you try to grasp...
All right. I don't necessarily agree with everything that he's saying here going forward because of the book of Enoch, but it's probably worth... I don't know. How are we doing on time? We're at 2 hours. Yeah, we could probably got time. We'll listen to some more.
Grasp that prematurely, it'll kill you. So what does the serpent do? He lies. He tells Adam and Eve that you will not certainly die. You will be like God, knowing good and evil. And
that's that son of perdition right there.
The serpent's lie isn't that they'll know good and evil. That part is true. Verse 22 confirms it.
And you see that in people today with narcissism. I think narcissism and empath is a really good distinction between the two, because narcissists elevate themselves. They seek worship. It's almost like they think of themselves higher or equivalent to God, or that they are the anointed. And that's that serpent that says that you will be like God.
The lie is that they won't die. So
Jesus did not exhibit any narcissistic tendencies. There are doctors who have many channels about this that are worth your time. If you just start YouTubing narcissism and empath from the Bible and YouTube, and you'll come across several of them. Really worth your time to listen to.
Priest and the guardian.
You want to understand the true spirit of Antichrist, the spirit that is against Christ. Christ was an empath. He was empathetic. Spirit of Antichrist is a narcissistic spirit.
Fails to stop him. So he failed to guard the sanctuary. And that led to the exile from the temple. Genesis 3 says, the Lord God banished him from the Garden of Eden. After he drove the man out, he placed cherubims and a flaming sword to guard the way of the tree of life. And so what happens here is Adam and Eve are expelled. And the Hebrew word actually is garash. It's like a violent expulsion. It's like, get out of here. It was actually probably more violent than that. And the cherubim are placed at the entrance, the same cherubim that will guard the most holy place. So at this rate, humanity has lost access to God's presence. We can't enter the temple anymore. We are outside, separated.
That's really the key point, is in the beginning, God lost access, or people lost access to God's presence.
From the tree of life. And the tragedy of that is not that it's just about sin. It's that the fact that we are cut off from God. We are exiled from the place where heaven and earth meet. So here's actually where it all starts to come together. The entire biblical story is God's plan to restore humanity to his presence. After the fall, fortunately, God does not abandon us. God told the Israelites to have a sanctuary made for him and that he will dwell among them. Since you can't come to me, I'll come to you. And so that tabernacle idea is God reestablishing his presence with us. It was the portable Eden. It wasn't the same. There are barriers, but it's a start. Solomon progresses that a little bit by building the temple. And then in 1 Kings 8, it says that the glory of the Lord filled it so intensely that the priests literally could not function in there. And so the temple is Eden continued, but still not Eden restored because the most holy place is protected. And then Jesus shows up. John 1 says that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. He made his dwelling, or the Greek word eskenizen. In other words, he tabernacled. Jesus tabernacled in us, and God's presence is now in human flesh. Yep. A chapter later, Jesus says, destroy this temple and I'll raise it again in 3 days. And the temple that he was speaking of was his body. Mm-hmm. So Jesus is the temple, and he's where you can access God's presence now.
Correction, he's the cornerstone of the temple. We're stones built on top of that temple. When you believe that, so Romans 10:9 and 10, that if thou shalt confess with thy mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. For with the heart man believeth unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession is made unto salvation. He's the cornerstone. So you're recognizing that God dwelled within him, that death had no power over him, and that God raised him from the dead.
Matthew 4, Jesus is going into the wilderness, and he is tempted by Satan and wins. He doesn't fail like Adam. In Mark, he was with the wild animals and angels attended him. Wild animals and angels together? I think that's a clear indicator of Eden, because Jesus is the new Adam succeeding where the first Adam failed. In the cross that Jesus was killed on actually opens this way. In Matthew 27, it says, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The veil embroidered with cherubim, the barrier keeping humanity out, is torn. God just rips it open. The way back to Eden is open. Jesus was telling the thief, today you will be with me in paradise. Paradios, the Garden of Eden. Jesus is taking people back. In 1 Corinthians 3, Paul says that you yourselves are God's temple. So like the temple is no longer the building, it is the people. God dwells in us as Christians. And if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The new has come, the old has passed away. Eden is being restored one person at a time. But that's not where this all ends. Revelation 21 says, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. Eventually, God will dwell with humanity permanently with no barriers. It goes on to say that the river of life, the tree of life are both back with no cherubim guarding them, and that there will no longer be any curse. The curse from Genesis 3, the same curse in the Garden of Eden, will be lifted, and they will see his face. Christians will see God face to face. The thing that was too dangerous in Eden is now safe. And so the story that started with God walking with Adam in the garden ends with redeemed humanity walking with God in the new creation. So why does it matter that Eden is God's temple? Well, the first thing to notice is that it reframes the fall, because the fall is no longer just about breaking a rule. It's about losing access to God's presence. You know, Adam and Eve.
Yeah, and then so my addition to that, it's not really an argument because I'm not disagreeing with him. I'm adding additional information. Is the reason that happened is because the intermingling of blood. They came down, they introduced uncleanness, and that is what introduced death, and that is the reason why Yeshua had to be born of a virgin, right? Because he could not inherit that same uncleanness that was introduced into the bloodline, but because he was pure and God had implemented a system of covering with sacrifice with Adam and Eve, that the perfect sacrifice could cleanse. And part of the reason also why he has to return is because, you know, we're still in these corrupted bodies. These bodies have not been, this temple has not been fully cleansed. This is a temple body. In order to enter the kingdom of heaven, you must be born again, which means getting a new body, one without the corruption that was originally introduced with Adam and Eve's poor decision-making.
We're in the place where heaven and earth meet, and they were walking with God literally, and they lost it. And so that whole story is about exile, about being cut off from the source of life. And the tragedy is that that relationship was a broken fellowship with God. Another thing that it shows is God's consistent plan through all of this. He had one plan all along, to dwell with humanity. Eden was the first, and then it was the tabernacle, then it was the temple, then it was the incarnation when Jesus came, then it was Pentecost, And then ultimately it was the new creation. It's the same story. God wants to be with us. He's been working toward that goal from Genesis 2 to Revelation 22. And that ultimately makes the whole redemption story bigger, because Jesus is not just forgiving sins, he's opening the way back to Eden. And the interesting thing about this is that salvation is not just about going to heaven when you die. It's about being restored in fellowship with God's creation. And it also explains our purpose, because we're made in the image of God. We're image bearers, and we are meant to represent God on earth. And if you think about it, Adam's job was to serve and guard Eden, and our job now is to be living temples, or the place where people encounter God. And one day, in the new creation, we will fulfill what Adam was meant to do the whole time.
Yep.
We are the ones who are going to be ruling and reigning with Christ. And it makes the gospel so much bigger, because it's more than just individual souls here. It's literally reclaiming all of creation. It's fulfilling the original mandate of making the rest of the world like Eden. Romans 8 says that creation itself waits to be liberated and brought into glory. And so the gospel is about God making all things new, not just dealing with the sin in our lives. So when you read Genesis 2 now, I hope you see it differently. Eden isn't just a garden. It's the cosmic mountain, the place where he dwells with humanity. And Adam wasn't a farmer. He wasn't a gardener. He was a priest. And the fall wasn't just about disobedience. It was about this exiled relationship that we have.
Well, it was about,
and it's so
it was about disobedience, because he did what he wasn't supposed to do. And I speculate that Adam is probably a figure of speech for mankind, for the bloodline, because there's language in there that implies that they had already started taking God's command to be fruitful and multiply to heart long before the fall, long before the Watchers, because obviously they had to have children in order for the Watchers to see the daughters of Adam, in order to want to take them as wives. So there's a lot more to it, but really good video. So now, with that in mind, now we can go back and talk about how sin can be visited to the third and fourth generation, understanding from a both a bloodline perspective and corruption in the blood, as well as doctrinal. Let's get into this.
It sounds horrible to me. God bless you. Thank you, sweetheart.
Thank you for your call, Bill. Go ahead and hang up now. Tune in for your answer. Thank you. Rabbi?
You know, I've had Nazis, excuse me. I actually had a Nazi once when I was on Channel 7. He was in Hitler Youth who apologized to me, but he was in, but I've had the children and grandchildren of Nazis apologize to me, and I didn't know what to say. But they were effusive in their how they were just very apologetic. I've had Germans. Look, I've had it, and I said, look, you didn't do this, but they really. All right, so no one inherits anyone's sin. That cannot be. That's what could.
How many people do you know have died? Right? Isn't death a consequence of sin from Adam and Eve? I believe it is. And the day you eat thereof, thou shalt surely die.
Be more unjust. However, you left out a word. You left out a word. So let's go to the Ten Commandments. Let's go to Exodus chapter 20, verse 5. Sweetheart, read a passage, but the whole passage, and read it in context, okay? It's really, really important, okay? So you have to read the whole passage. So it's Exodus 20, verse 5. The context is the prohibition of worshiping idolatry. Lo yisachar lohem, lo yisa'avdem. You should not bow down to them, and you should not serve them. Ki anochi Hashem Elokecha kelkano. I am a God who is a jealous God. Avon avos albonim. I will visit the iniquity, or count. The word really is to count the iniquity of what the parents do on the descendants. Al shleishim v'al rebeim, but you left out the last word, and that is l'soinai, to those who continue to hate me. So that last word is the kicker, and if you leave that out, then you have no clue what's going on. So let's now breathe. Let's saturate this passage with meaning rather than confusion.
Okay, before he does that, let's read it clearly here. It says, you shall, so let's read, start in 4. You shall not make for yourself a carved image. Actually, let's just read the whole context here so we understand where this is. This is the first commandment out of the 10 commandments. It's not the first commandment chronologically. This is the first commandment that was given to Moses to give to the children of Israel. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. Why would he say something like that? Because you have to understand that the children of Israel are many generations removed from Adam, right? And the Nephilim were dwelling on the planet at this time. And Nephilim had surely died up at this point. And we know from Enoch that when a Nephilim dies, because there's no place for their spirit to go, the spirit wanders to and fro in the earth. Very likely the curse of the serpent, right? The God had told the serpent that let's go read Genesis 3. Genesis 3. Now the serpent was more cunning than any other beast of the field which the Lord God had made, and he said to the woman, has God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? The woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the knowledge of good and evil. Then the serpent said to let's see, where does it say that he's cursed? She took of the fruit and did eat. She gave also to her husband and ate. Then the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves covering, and they heard the sound of the Lord walking. Okay, it's further down. Let's see. The woman said, the serpent deceived me and I ate. So the Lord God said to the serpent, okay, here's what I wanted to read. Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. I don't have Enoch prepped. I do have Enoch here, but I don't know where it is in Enoch. Here, we can find it. I get weird about having people to take my word for things. I prefer to just show you so you don't have to take my word for it. Where in Enoch does it say that evil spirits are from Nephilim? We'll just look it up here. First Enoch 15:8, and now the giants who are produced from the spirits and flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies because they are born from men, and from the holy watchers is their beginning and primal origin. They shall be evil spirits on earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. And then in 11, and the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth and cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst and cause offenses. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the women, because they have proceeded from them. Then we go back over here. You are cursed more than all the cattle, more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. There's a lot packed into this statement when you consider all the information that we have to evaluate with Enoch and the evil spirits. But going back to... where did I put that tab? Exodus, here you go. So, you shall have no other gods before me. The disembodied, the evil spirits were on the earth likely at this time. And all what they do is they obstruct, they cause problems, they cause people to worship other things, they cause them to worship them. This is why, worship is such a problem, is because of what happened in the garden, what happened originally, and what resulted in evil spirits today. So God's setting down some ground rules. You shall have no other gods before me. You've got to be clear. And he's starting to set the focus of the children of Israel. You need to focus correctly so that we can get back to fixing things eventually. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above or that is in the earth beneath. So no birds, no stars, no sun, moon, and stars, no animal, no fish, no bird, no man, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them nor serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me. So what Tovia misses blatantly in this section is that this is a focus of attention that is iniquity, to where you're worshiping, you're serving, and you're teaching. So this is the iniquity that's visited to the third and fourth generations, I believe, is train up a child. So Ephesians 6 says, train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. I think that's also in the Old Testament. But if you train a child to worship a God that's not the creator of the heavens and earth, then they're likely to believe that and teach it to their children. So you have iniquity that is passed down from generation to generation. This is not talking about blood or anything genetic. This, I believe, is talking about you know what it is that you serve, what it is that you believe, and how those beliefs are a lot like leaven. A little bit of leaven leavens the whole loaf. It's problematic. And combine that with evil spirits that are, causing problems with this is what we've struggled with. This is what we wrestle against on the planet. For we wrestle not against, is that Ephesians 6:12? For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. All right, back over here.
Fusion. What's happening here? So here a person has a father who worshipped idols, and it came to know it, or engaged in all kinds of sin, and
yeah, that's right, William. A cross is an image.
Came to know it.
That's why you never see any crosses around my neck or anything. You see the menorah, because the menorah is actually in the Torah, and it's representative of the tree of life and the church. But it's not for any worship purpose.
Now, most of us, fortunate enough, get to know our grandparents. Not all, but most of us do. I did.
Yeah, and that's a good distinction, Fury, only if you use it in a form of worship, which unfortunately a lot of people do. There is a truth behind it. I mean, Moses did lift up if you were going to wear anything, it should be a stick with a snake on it. Because that's what, just looking at the serpent on the pole is what saved the children of Israel from the snake bite.
Right? So you get to see, typically, a person at least gets to know one or two of the grandparents, and you see that your grandfather engaged in sin and his life came to naught, and you continue to hate me, so I'm going to punish you more. Why? Because you should have known better, right? I mean, you saw your grandfather smoking a cigarette, right? And he died. He was only 65.
A good example of how what you serve and what you worship can be detrimental is the Islamic belief about spreading your seed, or about murdering people who are less than you. You get these beliefs that cause you to sin, such as murder. That's one of the commandments. One of the things God told us not to do. Thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not commit adultery. You get these beliefs, supported by doctrines that cause you to sin.
5 years old, and you're smoking still? What would you have? I'm just using this as a metaphor. I mean, you lost your grandfather because he was a smoker, right? Or a drinker, right? And he didn't get to walk you down the aisle. He wasn't at your wedding. Why? Because he was smoking. So, and you smoke still, depriving your grandchildren of this? So the point is that you see the damage of sin. and you still continue that. So a person is punished more because you should have known better. Now,
I'm sorry, Tovia. I think this is a terrible example. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I think it's kind of along the same lines of what we're talking about with doctrinal issues, beliefs, idolatry, worship, that kind of iniquity. But I don't think that the smoke, watching your father or grandfather smoke, is a good example of how the iniquity gets visited to the third and fourth generation.
although typically under ordinary natural circumstances and ordinary natural lifespans, we get to know.
You know, when you think about it, what we believe determines who we are. And that is one of the big problems with the legacy media, is the way it manipulates what people believe. That's a big element to what we're dealing with in this end time period, is we're dealing with what, and it's getting worse with artificial intelligence. You can't trust the things that you see. You can't trust what people are telling you. There's so much value and working to get to the truth, because what you believe determines how you behave, which is why I say the mark of the beast is very likely something doctrinal. It changes you. It directs you. It affects your behavior. That's where the right hand comes in. It affects what you bless. It affects where you put your work. It affects what you do.
At least one grandparent, two grandparents, and I'm willing to bet, incidentally, that it was a grandparent of yours that was.
Look at the people that have Trump derangement syndrome, and their children have Trump derangement syndrome as a result. That's a good example of iniquity being visited to the third and fourth generation. People often, because it's put in terms of God visiting something, really what it is it's a declaration of a reality. Like, you get the fake media lying about Donald Trump, filling their heads with fake information, things that are untrue, causes these people to absolutely hate somebody. Their children see that, mirror that, and then they suffer from the same thing. That's visiting iniquity to the third and fourth generation.
Probably the most influential and most important person in your life, right? So grandparents are really important.
It's amazing how hard it is to fight against those things. When somebody believes something, when they truly believe something, and these people truly believe that Donald Trump is evil. They truly believe that that he's the worst, and he's never given them any reason to. If anything, it's the complete opposite. And yet, even in the face of reality, they still believe the lie. Man, what a good representation of what we've been dealing with throughout the centuries.
But there are some people who get to know their great grandparents. I did not. But some do. Some people get to know and grow up knowing at least one great grandparent. That could happen, right? So therefore, why say three?
I wonder if AI wasn't allowed to be developed now as a means to show us just how close the devil gets to imitating reality. Like with we're so used to trying to, if I can't believe it, if I can't see it with my own eyes, I won't believe it. Well, now you can see these things with your own eyes, and there's some cases where you probably shouldn't believe it. That's just how close to reality the serpent is able to fake things and cause problems and get you to believe believe a lie.
And 4 generations to those women, which is it 3 or is it 4? What is it, 3 and 4? Because 3, usually people get to know a grandparent, and you saw your grandparent who was a sinner, because that's the context. And
okay, I got to call you out on that. The context is actually idolatry. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I am the Lord your God. I am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, hate because they're replacing him. We've talked about the unforgivable sin of replacing God with something else. when this is, when Jesus says love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself, part of loving God is not idolizing anything else. Don't replace him with something else of more importance to your life. You love God by not bowing down or serving anything else other than him, the creator of the heavens and the earth. And it doesn't take a child knowing their great-great-grandfather in order for that iniquity to pass. They can learn it from their own dad. You've got a grandfather, a father, you've got a dad, a son, and then his son. And the dad just has to teach his son some kind of a falsehood. And then his son needs to teach his son some kind of falsehood. And that can last several generations. So imagine it's Trump derangement syndrome. You've got a father who has bad Trump derangement syndrome. His son sees that. He gets bad Trump derangement syndrome. His son sees that, gets bad Trump derangement syndrome. It could take 3 and 4 generations before somebody says, why do you hate this guy? They've done they've done experiments with mice and rats and stuff like that about how knowledge, like they'll do things to where they're like, put something in the cage, like a little piece of food that's really good or something like that, and then they'll electrify it. And if the mouse goes and tries to eat from it, they get electrocuted. So they stop doing that. And that gets passed down from generation to generation to before, at some point there's no original mice left, but the children of the mice won't touch that thing because they've learned from their parents, don't touch that, or for whatever reason. There's could be even genetic issues. That's visiting iniquity to the 3rd and 4th generations. I believe. I could be wrong, but I think that's a really good explanation.
Still did it despite that. So therefore, you're going to be held more accountable because you should have known better. You saw the behavior of your progenitors and you repeated it despite the fact that you saw nothing. And that's why the Torah says 3 and 4 generations, because 3 generations, under ordinary circumstances, people at least get to know a grandparent. Not all your grandparents, but, not all 4, but you get to know 1, 2. I got to know 2. Well, yeah, I got to know 2. I had a grandfather who was alive while I was alive, but he passed away while I was a baby. My mother's father died so I have no memory of him. Okay? My great-grandfather was murdered by the Germans in the spring of 1944 when Hungarian Jewry was destroyed. So it's really, this is, when you take Torah, it's so delicious, so beautiful. And you understand what's being conveyed here, so then it becomes exquisite. So that's why it's 3 and 4 generations. And why did God hold you accountable? It's not if you're innocent, if your father sinned, God forbid, but you've turned away from that sin, so you're not held accountable. Quite the contrary. You're a champion. You're a champion. It's talking about those who keep sinning despite what they've witnessed during their life.
Here, I found a little short that I think explains. That's a good example. Does a better job than what you're doing, Tovia. I love you. I really do. I can't wait until you recognize that Jesus is the Messiah. But here's another example of iniquity to the 3rd and 4th generation.
What blew my mind about last time when we talked, and you know where I'm going with this, is the study on the mouse, the 5 generations. And to kind of illuminate a little bit of it, I'll do my job, which is re-explaining something interesting I heard, but not remembering any of the terms, and just like kind of how it made me feel. So here you go. They took these mice, scientists took a group of mice, and they scared them somehow and played an audio sound at the same time.
That's my memory of it, yeah.
Okay, and then they bred these mice out 5 generations, and somehow the mice 5 generations later knew that sound associated with a fear response. Mm-hmm. And of course they controlled it with mice that weren't scared and were exposed to the same sounds, and somehow the memory of being scared of a sound.
Yep. Yeah, so genetic memory. So when I brought this up to you originally, I was talking about, I asked you, do you have a phobia? And of course you said no. But Billy said, usually people have I have a phobia of spiders or something. Sometimes it's really random, you have a phobia of.
They actually bring up a good point in talking about this. It wouldn't surprise me if there isn't, because I've made the observation before about quantum consciousness. How is it that a mother can know when one of her children are hurt or in danger when they can be anywhere in the world? I've literally had this happen to me, to where I'll be on the other side of the United States and my mom will know something has hurt me, that I've been into a car accident or something like that. I know a lot of you guys have similar experiences. That could also be another way that iniquity is visited to the third and fourth generation.
A dark room. Say.
Right, okay.
Yeah, exactly. No reason to be scared of this dark room. You don't have a memory associated with it. Maybe you've concocted one, but really don't have one. And part of that, the reason why you're scared of it, is something called genetic memory. They're just now tapping into this. The potential of this concept is mind-boggling. But, to test this kind of idea, the idea of genetic memory is that whatever your ancestor went through, it can be encoded in your DNA in real time, and that can potentially get passed on to your offspring. It's through epigenetics, and I can get into that later. But
I guess the bad part is I'm setting you right up here in the beginning with something that we don't even know a whole lot about yet. But I wanted to bring up, just because I can't fathom how a sperm and or an egg, you might as well imagine both of them for all purposes at this time, but somehow that memory is there.
Yep. It's in the genetic code. So I think it's important to get into epigenetics later, but back to the mouse study. So essentially, again, they expose these mice to a fear situation, and I believe it's like they showed a color and they shocked them or something like that, and then they never expose them again to that color, and then they have the control group, which only sees the color but they don't get shocked. And then 5 generations out, and it's not that it stopped at 5 generations, they just stopped the study at 5 generations. So they could keep going. So it
could be like 10 or 15.
Yeah, or unlimited. The thing is,
how much do mice cost? Like, can you do this?
All right, you guys get the point. I don't want to waste time on all these side videos. I wanted to find the original study. I thought this was going to be one of them, but you get the point.
That the sin of my parents got them nowhere. The sin of my grandfather, who I knew, and I saw what he did, and I'm still doing that. My grandfather beat my grandmother, or whatever he did. He worshiped whatever he did. But you're repeating it? So then Hashem holds you more accountable. You should know better. And that's why it says 3 and 4, V'al Rebbeim. Why is the 4th generation? Because you maybe get to know your great-grandparents, but under normal circumstances, a person never gets to know their great-great-parents. So therefore, the Torah stops at the 4th generation. But the key word is that last word at the end of the verse. The sonai means to those who hate me. So therefore, they're not innocent. They're people who will continue in the sin, but then the punishment is greater because they should have known better. Thank you for that thoughtful question.
Guys, hit that like button.
All right. I think we adequately addressed the house of Israel in this case. I think we explained some good points about sin. You can mess up your blood by introducing genetic corruption, some of that. A lot of that is based on theory, but I think it's very sound reasoning based on what is written. So sin could potentially be introduced into the blood if the command was don't breed, don't go making babies with that other, those people over there. You can introduce corruption in the blood. That's sin. That's something you're going to be dealing with for, as long as we've been dealing with Adam's corrupted blood. But then you also have the element of Exodus 20, to where iniquity can be visited to the 3rd and 4th generations. And we talked about a couple of different ways that could happen. One is, children see their parents, and you can learn knowledge that way, which can be passed down from generation to generation. But there's also evidence that there could be something deeper, like genetic memory. I would argue that we're just now beginning to understand quantum mechanics, and that there's probably something even deeper than genetic memory, some kind of quantum connection because I know I've experienced it, and I know that many of you have probably experienced it too, to where you've had a parent or a friend or a sibling know something that they had no business in knowing. Maybe that was God communicating it to them. That could be too. It could be, it could be that Holy Spirit in you communicating the information. But it could also be that there's some kind of invisible connection that binds us together. So there's a couple of different ways that iniquity can be visited to the third and fourth generation. And so how does Jesus pay for our sins? How does he fix that? Well, see, I had some notes on this. Let me go find the notes. So sin, you need to understand sin. The Bible doesn't outright define what sin is. But there are indications enough that we can make kind of come up with a definition. So in 1 John 3:4, everyone who makes a practice of sinning also practices lawlessness. So God gave us the law, and he's given us commandments. So God gave the law to Moses to give to the children of Israel so that they could follow that and know God's will. Working contrary to that is lawlessness, also known as sin. Sin is missing the mark. God also told Adam, of all the trees of the knowledge, of all the trees in the garden, you may freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day you eat thereof, thou shalt surely die. So James 4:17 tells us, whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. So, there's definitely, knowing right from wrong and intentionally doing something wrong. It's more than just, 10 commandments. There's, when, if you're treating somebody poorly, this is why, when someone asked Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and prophets. There's a general understanding of what's right and what's wrong. And, if you're doing something to wrong your neighbor, you're going against God's will. That is a form of sin. So how does Jesus pay for that? He set an example for us. He set an example of what it was to live according to Torah, when to be empathetic and when to be angry. He was, when the woman was caught in adultery and thrown at his foot, they said the law says that we should stone her. And he said, let him among you who was among you without sin cast the first stone. Well, Jesus was the only one without sin amongst them. He was the only one who had the right to cast the first stone, and he chose not to. So that is your example of how to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Is just because something is written in the law, does it go against right and wrong? He gave us an example of that. So there's that element of how Jesus helped us with sin, but how the bigger picture, which most often goes missed, is the blood elements. When God, and we've gone through so many things. I'm just going to have to take my word on this. I've done some videos that go into depth on this in the last week or so. If you guys want the scripture, I'll share them with you. But God made clothes of animal skin after Adam and Eve had sinned. That was the first. That had to have been the first sacrifice for failing to obey what God had told them to obey. And we learn from Leviticus 17:11 that the life of the flesh is in the blood, and it was given for atonement. So there was a temporary solution that it was solved by sacrifice. And Jesus, he doesn't have. Man, I'm kind of butchering this. I feel like this is where I get myself in trouble. I feel like I have to go into depth on this stuff because I don't want somebody to hear just part of this and not understand it. Okay, here's the too long didn't read on this. Adam was formed from the dust of the ground. Eve was not formed from the dust of the ground. She was taken from Adam's rib, which indicates that the material needed for a human can come from the rib, which we know scientifically is true because the rib is one of the places to get stem cells. So God formed Eve from Adam, likely from her rib. Everything needed for a human body came from the rib. So from that, we can extrapolate that a similar process could have taken place. I'm not saying that it did, but there's good reasoning and logic that this could explain how Jesus came into being. Mary, when she said, "Be it unto me according to your word," God could have taken stem cells from her rib, because Genesis 3:15 says the seed of the woman will bruise the head of the serpent. So it turns out that you can take stem cells from a woman's rib and form seed. We've proven this in science. It's a process called gameto-genesis. Look it up on Google. They've successfully done this in mice, where they've taken stem cells from the rib of a mouse, caused it to become seed, and implanted it into that same mouse in order to produce progeny. A process like this could have taken place with Mary producing Jesus, who did not inherit the same seed as Adam, right? But he would have had the same genetics because it was all from Mary, right? So God knew in the very beginning, in the entire process, when he started this thing with Adam and Eve, he had already planned on Jesus. He built this into the process so that he could take the cells from the rib in order to produce seed. So he knew what he was talking about when he proclaimed in Genesis 3:15, the seed of the woman will bruise the head of the serpent. That's because everything that God had put together led towards Jesus being our king, being our leader. And I should also note that that's what makes him the Son of God, is because he had no biological father. So in the same way that Adam had no biological father, Adam was a son of God. Jesus had no biological father. That's how he was the Son of God. And as being the Son of God, he would have been in the same state as Adam, to where God dwelled within him, likely from birth. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't until he was baptized and the Spirit came upon him, and God said, "This is my beloved Son, in who I am well pleased." But yeah, so that's what made him the lamb without blemish, so that when they killed him, death had no authority or power over him, because he was not subject to the same curse that Adam was. Adam and Eve, God told him, "In the day you eat thereof, thou shalt surely die." Which we know, this is another thing we learn from the book of Enoch, that a day to God is as 1,000 years. Or 1,000 years to us is as a day to God. So when he proclaimed that in the day you eat thereof, thou shalt surely die, it's entirely possible it wasn't referring to that day, the very moment that he took of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but that within 1,000 years he would die. And again, that's another thing that leads towards the sin actually producing children with the Watchers and with the Nephilim, because it would take 1,000 years for the breeding and the genetics to play out the way they did. This is why people no longer live 1,000 years, because of what happened in the beginning. Anyway, but Yeshua was not subject to that same curse. He in his body, he potentially could have lived indefinitely. So when he was killed, when he was killed, death had no power over him, which allowed God to raise him from the dead. So anyway, I think you guys have any questions on that? Have I sufficiently? I should put this screen up. Have I sufficiently covered all our bases on today's video for addressing the house of Israel? What are you guys talking about? All right, I'm going to start talisman commandment. Do you guys want me to address anything in the comments? I see Fury is responding to someone. I'm not even gonna begin to do you guys need me to address anything? I think Fury's probably got it. All right, so let's do a quick summary of the timeline, just because I like doing these.
I created the heavens and the earth, a perfect harmony, a timeless birth. I shaped the stars, I set them free, a world of wonder, a song for me. I formed the man, the dust took flight. I gave the woman a shared delight. Together they stood.
All right, so let me guys help you out with the idols and the worship and the artwork. Tell me if this helps simplify it for you. How do if you think about the item, well, number one, what is the reason for the item? Whether it's a cross, a picture, is it, do you own the item and do you have it around you because somebody told you that if you pray to it, something will happen? That's affecting your belief. It's changing, it's having an effect on your behavior. If you're, for instance, are you praying to an image of Mary with the expectation that she's going to do something for you? Or are you even praying to an image of Jesus? If that's what you're doing, that is idolatry. And honestly, it doesn't even have to be a carved image or a piece of artwork or something. You can even take this to just, is there a belief that you're looking to something that's not biblical, expecting it to do something for you? That's where this is. You got to be really careful. If you're not doing that, if you just have a picture of, Jonathan from The Chosen or whatever his name is, because it blesses you to have some kind of a, to kind of think about what Jesus might have looked like, I don't think that's technically idolatry. I believe the heart of it is having this item in your presence changing your behavior in a way that's contrary to God's will. And you have to understand the danger and the reason why for the first commandment is because it goes all the way back to the sin in the Garden of Eden, replacing God with something else. And that's the first thing you need to be mindful of. Like, for your own health and your own benefit, is don't replace God with anything in his creation, and have it, be the thing that guides you and directs you. He wants you to go to him. And this is a big part of being the temple, having God within you, where God dwells within you, is you should be talking to God and looking to him for your answers, because he's the one who can actually make them come to pass. Jesus, being his son, is a way to God, because all things whatsoever you shall ask in my name. He doesn't specifically say ask him. And when you look at his life, he always went to his Father. And even when gave an example of how to pray, our Father who art in heaven, he always directed people to his Father. So he said, all things whatsoever you shall ask in my name, I will do it for you. You know, he is alive. He was raised from the dead. He's just not here with us. That's why we're looking for him to come back. But, you know, he has the ear of his Father. So it's perfectly okay to ask for things in his name. But if you're replacing his Father with anything else, that's where you're just dangerously close to idolatry. And it's what else can I say that I'm trying not to make this overly complicated. I want to make this simple because it really is just that simple, to where God wants you to have the relationship with him and doesn't want you to be tricked by anything else, by replacing anything else with him. And there's a lot of deep fake equivalents, and especially with church, that come from church. You know, people believe some of the dumbest things. And in some cases, they get results because, there are evil spirits in this world that really like to mess with people. So, the Jews, and I think this is something they have correct, to where signs, miracles, and wonders are not necessarily evidence of, God doing something. This is a reality we have to deal with, which is a result of the flood, which is part of the curse, part of the iniquity, part of the transgression, is we have to deal with the evil spirits that wander to and fro in the earth. This is why Jesus said, resist the devil, resist the devil and he will flee from you. If you're being attacked by these things, resist them, hold to what's true, go to God in prayer, ask him, for protection and help, and, he will. The devil loves to go to church. Exactly. And when you think about it, you've got these entities, they have to have some form of consciousness, and there's something about our bodies that they can have an influence and even possess people. I do believe that possession is a real thing, that these evil spirits can possess people and they can influence people, and they, and they can, all they have to do is convince one person of something, and then that person believes it and convinces other people. That's a big problem we have to deal with. So that's why it's so vitally important that you got to be so careful about what you have around you that you're looking to for direction, guidance, or salvation, or any of those things. You need the relationship with God first. That's the most powerful relationship. That's how you love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then your neighbor as yourself. Is your behavior, are you being empathetic? Are you being narcissistic? That's a really good test. Are you more concerned about you and what brings you joy, that you're ignoring, your kids, your wife, your neighbor, strangers, homeless people, or are you making an effort to, where you have the means, and even when you don't, even sometimes if it's to your own detriment, Jesus said, if somebody sues you for your shirt, give them your cloak also. It's like, this stuff's not important. And you're being an example of God's love when you do that. Anyway, I don't know if I made that more complicated, but I would say if you've just got something for decorations in your house and it's not controlling who you are, and you're not looking at it for guidance, that's fine. If you want a reminder of, the cross because of what it represents, that's fine. Are you praying to it for answers and expecting it to do something from you? Well, you might be inviting one of those evil spirits to start messing with your life. Same thing with the snake on a stick. Just by looking at the serpent on the stick, which I think is a representation of, the serpent, that evil, whatever the serpent is, whether it's a fallen angel, whether it's evil spirits, whatever, just by looking at it dead on a stick, you're healed from the snake bite. So just be careful what controls you. Look at the 144,000. They have the Lamb's Father's name in their forehead. That's their focus. The mark of the beasts is, I've got opinions on what that is, but really the right answer of what that is it's anything that replaces the Father's name in your head. Any belief, anything that replaces God in your mind and affects your behavior and your actions, that's likely the mark of the beast. In this case, in Revelation 13, it seems like it may be very specific to a particular government that's trying to get a certain behavior from people. But the underlying truth is, don't let anything replace God in your life. Okay, timeline report. How are we doing on time? Oh my gosh, geez, time flies. 3 hours. All right. We're going to make this really quick. You are here. Right here. We're right here right now. That puts us, I think, probably about here in the middle. So if you have this anchor point, the Revelation 12 sign in 2017, 2031. So this date, I haven't explained this in a while. This is 9/21/2017, which is Tishri 1, which is the beginning of the Hebrew New Year. And it also happens, and the reason this is important is because this day, the beginning of the Hebrew New Year, kind of floats. It is based on the new moon. And this is kind of where you get the two witnesses that come into the end time too. This is something that we can infer about the two witnesses. I need to find where this story comes from, where the origin of it is. But from what I understand, and they do this today in Jerusalem, in Israel, the way they set the first of the year is there has to be two independent witnesses have to observe the sliver of the moon, the new moon. So as soon as they see light, just the littlest bit of light on the moon after it's gone dark, as soon as they see that little bit of light, that's the beginning of the year. And 2 days after that, so it doesn't happen until two witnesses independently verify that they've seen the new light. 2 days after that, they set the Festival of Trumpets, which is why every year Festival of Trumpets is one of the high watch times for the rapture for most watchmen. So that's what this date is, 9/21/2017. And then 2 days after that, you had the Revelation 12 sign. I don't know if that one in 439, did the one in 439 happen on the festival? It was 830. I'll have to look that up to see if that was also the Festival of Trumpets. But anyway, this sign happened on the Festival of Trumpets. So that was the start of this whole thing. And the reason that is significant is because Revelation 12:1 describes this sign, and the sign is so rare and unique that it never happened. So suffice it to say, this is a starting point. It's an anchor. Oh, excuse me. My voice is starting to give out. Excuse me. So that's the anchor point. We've already gone 7 years, and in that 7 years, we went through 4 seals. Now we're getting ready to go into the 5th seal, right about here. So in the 5th seal, according to our research over the last couple of weeks, is very likely the beginning of the Great Tribulation. So what that means, we're continuing to look for evidence of what to expect. You can see the state of the world and kind of start making assumptions yourself. But it's known as the worst time ever on the planet. So not necessarily a good time. Excuse me for a minute. I forgot to mute my microphone. Turns out when you talk for 3 hours, your voice gets really dry. It doesn't help that I've been drinking soda too. All right. What was I saying? Yeah, so looks like we're getting ready to go into the fifth seal. The good news is based on this pattern, it may only be 6 months. So that might be what God means when he said he shortens it, for had he not shortened it, no flesh would survive. So if we're right about this, I'm expecting something tantamount to nuclear, something that can have a massive effect on populations. Now, the thing that we need to also keep in mind is that by shortening it doesn't mean, so I would not expect, so say there's 9 billion people on the planet, or for easier math, let's say 8 billion people on the planet. I would not expect like 7.5 billion people to die during the Great Tribulation. I don't think that's the right math, to where it's not like God leaves like a very teeny tiny percentage left. Probably what's more realistic would be the rest of those, because there's a certain number that were going to die during seal number 4, a quarter of the planet. I would imagine it's probably the rest of the quarter of the planet. So there's already been a lot of death. And if you're not in one of the areas where there's a lot of death, so Russia and Ukraine, Donald Trump quotes this number all the time. He says there's 7,000, roughly 7,000 people lose their life every week due to the Russia-Ukraine war. And then he said about 25 to 30,000 per month are losing their life. So if you're not in one of those areas, you may not realize how much catastrophe is happening. Well, there's other areas comparable to that, to where there's a lot of life being lost. For instance, Iran. The Ayatollah has, in the not so distant, just very recently, has been killing protesters by the tens of thousands. So we're in this period of time to where there's a lot of life being lost, there's a lot of loss of life. So spread it across the entire planet. There's, there could be potentially like so say 500 million people have died so far. We could still be looking at 1.5 billion that will be killed during seal number 5. And the reason why I say that number is because there's 2 more quantities of life lost that are mentioned in the seals to come. So there's another, what is it, a third of the earth? It escapes me now, but there's a couple periods where there's life lost. So like when the meteor wormwood hits, there's a number that are lost. When the earthquake, when the 2 witnesses are caught up to, there's a big earthquake there's a bunch of life lost. So my point being is, even though it says, for had he not cut it short, no flesh would survive, I think that probably covers the entire span from here. So the reason I want to explain that to you is a third and then a fourth, Fury says. The reason I wanted to explain that to you is to kind of frame the amount of life. Like it says it's worse than anything that's ever happened on the earth. There's been a lot of really bad things that have happened on the earth, and people have gotten through them. It's often said that, when there's a war, people don't even realize there's a war. You would never know that there's a war because people are still, shopping and having events. So it's entirely possible, when you think about it, for it to be like the days of Noah, to where people are eating and drinking, so we may be in the Great Tribulation, but you still might be able to buy groceries and go out to eat, is my point. But the amount of conflict and death around the world could be increasing. You know what I mean? Like there could be nuclear attacks. There can be uprising of death cults, religious death cults, where people believe that they get rewarded for killing people. That could increase. because there are other promises in the scripture that still need to hold true, such as the Church of Philadelphia, who are told that one of the benefits of being in that group is they're kept from the trials coming on the whole world. That may or may not apply to this period of time. So if you don't see any tribulation, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not happening. It could be happening elsewhere, and you might be one of the lucky ones that are kept from the trials coming on the whole world. So I just got to make sure that we frame all of that for expectations of what's coming. So as we watch these things, really the answers come hindsight. Like I said, it took a while to confirm that seal number 1 had been opened. You know, there were signs. It was obvious. There was an eclipse in Sagittarius, which is a rider with a bow who had a crown. I mean, like, that was like, I'm pretty sure seal number 1 is opened. But it was TV commercial. It was the news reporting, you know, a sickness had been identified in Wuhan, China, and seemed to be highly contagious. That was the day of the opening of the seal. It wasn't really big fanfare, but it was after that, you know, 2 weeks to slow the spread, and then they turned it into 2 months, and then it just continued for 2 years to where, you know, it had covered the entire world at one point. So keeping all of that in mind, this is where we are. All right. God bless you guys. Thanks for hanging out with me this long. This has been over 3 hours. I don't like to go this long. I prefer to keep it at 2. But we covered a lot of stuff tonight. So thank you so much for joining me. If you like this content, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel to get notifications. Come here and visit us. If you like the commercial-free versions, we don't do any commercials during the live show, but there's no promises for the recuts that we post later on, because turning on the commercials is what causes the YouTube algorithm to really push them out to get more view on that content. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. Really appreciate it. God bless you guys. Shalom, shalom. See you guys tomorrow at 4:30 Pacific time, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. Shalom.